Chapter 1588, Bloodline Improves. Chapter 1588, Bloodline Improves. After the stone enveloping the Shrine Knight shattered on the platform, it started to move towards Feng. As the situation developed, the pressure Feng felt continued to build. Had Feng not known that the Shrine's trials wouldn't kill the challengers, he would have likely used Absolute Domain to defend himself. Challenger, you have two choices. The first is to dodge all of my attacks. The second is to surpass me in combat standards. Your time limit is 3 hours. You have 3 minutes to consider. If you do not decide in 3 minutes, you'll be forced out of the shrine automatically, the Shrine Knight mechanically explained. Dodge all of his attacks or surpass him in combat standards. Feng took a closer look at the Shrine Knight before him. After a moment of consideration, he declared, I choose the second option. The Shrine Knight was a Tier 4 Sword Emperor. Even if the NPC were the same level as Feng, its attacks wouldn't be a trivial matter. Furthermore, Feng was still in a weakened state. That would make it even more difficult to dodge every one of the Sword Emperor's attacks. Competing against the Shrine Knight in combat standards was his only chance to clear the challenge. Normally, after NPCs reached Tier 3, their combat standards would be on par to ordinary expert players. Some powerful Tier 3 NPCs could even reach the refinement realm. Including NPCs' superior attributes, Tier 3 NPCs were generally far more powerful than Tier 3 players. Even the weakest Tier 4 NPCs' combat standards were at the refinement realm, and the more powerful ones could even reach the void realm. Not even Tier 4 peak experts would have dared to provoke Tier 4 NPCs in the past. As for the heroes who were summoned to protect towns and cities, those capable of reaching Tier 4 had no issue reaching the void realm. This was precisely why they could summon towns and cities. Although Feng bore a weakened state, his combat standards weren't affected. Moreover, competing against a Tier 4 NPC via techniques was a rare opportunity. Unlike players, and NPCs' combat techniques were far more refined. Their application could even stun players. Excellent. Let's start the battle then. During this time, my basic attributes will drop to match yours. I will also be set at Tier 2. Neither of us will be allowed to use any skills or spells during this fight. You're also prohibited from using any tools. You will only complete the trial after depleting my HP completely, the Shrine Knight said, nodding. His aura then began to weaken as the Shrine Knight fell from a level 100 Sword Emperor to a level 61 Sword Master. For a brief moment, Feng felt restricted. A notification then appeared, telling him that he was temporarily barred from using skills, spells, or tools. Shrine Knight now had 1 million HP remaining. It was entirely possible for Feng to end this battle quickly, even while relying on his combat techniques. Before Feng could prepare, the Shrine Knight appeared before him, its golden greatsword transforming into a streak of golden light that struck at Feng repeatedly in quick succession. So fast. Feng promptly executed Sword's Orbit as the Shrine Knight's blade descended. There wasn't a shred of hesitation in the Shrine Knight's movements. It seemed as if the NPC moved on instinct rather than rational thought. He was unlike players who usually thought before taking action. The near-instinctive movements allowed the Shrine Knight to execute attacks that were so fast that Feng couldn't preemptively defend himself. As a result, Feng had to rely on passive defense techniques like Sword's Orbit to protect himself from the incoming attacks. Bang, bang, bang. Metallic clangs echoed across the platform as dazzling sparks lit the air. If other players saw this, they'd be dumbfounded. As time passed, both fighters' movements became faster and smoother, and any ordinary expert would be overwhelmed by the scene. Although Feng and the Shrine Knight's swings were incredibly fast, their speed wasn't a result of high attack speed. Rather, it was due to their instinctive execution. Even after exchanging blows for several minutes, neither side had dealt any damage. As expected of a Sword Emperor, if I don't rely on Sword's Orbit to block his attacks, he'll likely kill me very quickly. Feng could not help his bitter smile as he deflected the NPC's frenzied attacks. Fighting the Shrine Knight reminded Feng of how powerful NPCs were. Despite their equally high attack speeds, the Shrine Knight overwhelmed Feng due to the difference in their reaction speeds. This won't do. I can't allow this to drag on. Realizing that none of his attacks reached the Shrine Knight, Feng retreated to search for more favorable terrain. Although the Shrine Knight had the same basic attributes as Feng, NPCs had far more stamina and concentration. Feng did not doubt for a second that the Shrine Knight could outlast him in a battle of endurance. As Feng retreated, he soon discovered a small grove of tall trees near the edge of the platform. That should work. Feng immediately made his way towards the small grove. Unlike players, NPCs weren't good at taking advantage of their surroundings. This fact even held true for Tier 4 NPCs. If he used the trees to block a portion of the Shrine Knight's attacks, he would have more opportunities to deal damage. However, as soon as Feng left the platform's central area, the Shrine Knight stopped his attacks and leaped backward, withdrawing from the battle. The NPC then turned and walked back to his original position. Crap. Is this for real? The system won't even give me a chance of winning? Feng was speechless when he saw the Shrine Knight recover to his original state. If he could not fight outside of the platform's central area, he wouldn't be able to take advantage of the terrain. If he continued to exchange blows mindlessly with the Shrine Knight, he would exhaust himself and die before his 3 hours were up. Why is this trial so difficult even though it's the lowermost epic shrine? Feng felt a wave of frustration wash over him as he stared at the motionless Shrine Knight. Whether it was players or NPCs, as long as they reached the Void Realm, they would have a clear grasp of movement around them. In addition, the Shrine Knight could execute near-instinctive attacks. Aside from Domain Realm experts, Feng doubted that anyone was capable of beating the Shrine Knight's combat standards. Of course, there was one way that Void Realm players could defeat an NPC like the Shrine Knight. An advanced offensive combat technique. But even now, Feng had only learned basic offensive combat techniques. He had only learned 2 advanced combat techniques, one of which was Void Steps, while the other was Sword's Orbit. Void Steps was a footwork technique, and ineffective against Void Realm NPCs and players. As for Sword's Orbit, it was mainly a defensive combat technique. It could not be considered a true offensive combat technique. Is giving up my only choice? Feng took a moment to consider the situation. Without being able to use his skills and spells, he had lost one of his major advantages. He couldn't use the Soul Water or Crystal of Souls he had produced with the Soul Orb to enhance his focus either. Without these options, he had no hope of defeating the Shrine Guard. If this continued to drag on, he'd only waste his precious time. As Feng searched his bag for any items that might help him, he came across the Dark Iron Bloodline. The restriction period had already ended, and he could now use the Bloodline. Fortunately, this didn't count as a prohibited item. That's right. How could I forget about the Bloodline? Feng laughed as he gazed at the Dark Iron Bloodline in his bag. When consumed, Bloodlines improved a player's life rating. When a player's life rating in God's domain increased, every aspect of their being improved. Reaction speed, stamina, and concentration were just a few of these aspects. Feng retrieved the Dark Iron Bloodline from his bag. Removing the crystal bottle's lid, he consumed the pitch-black liquid contained within. Chapter 1589, Frightening Bloodline Power. Chapter 1589, Frightening Bloodline Power. As Feng consumed the Dark Iron Bloodline, the mana on and around the platform began to gather around his body. Suddenly, 2 threefold magic arrays appeared above and below him. It looked as if the magic arrays had formed a barrier, enveloping Feng. The surrounding mana then poured into the threefold array above Feng, and golden, divine runes began to surround his body. As more divine runes appeared around Feng, his aura intensified. When the divine runes covered Feng entirely, a pillar of golden light emerged from Feng's body and shot into the sky. The golden pillar radiated an aura that was even stronger than the Shrine Knight's. A few seconds later, the light pillar began to dissipate and calm returned to the platform. Once the platform returned to its original state, Feng slowly opened his eyes. His previously pitch-black pupils now contained a trace of silver. Meanwhile, his aura, which he usually suppressed, overflowed. If an ordinary player saw him now, they'd assume that Feng was an NPC, not a player. Not only did he radiate a domineering aura, but his gaze also carried an indescribable cold. It felt as if Feng could remain calm and rational, regardless of his situation. So, this is the power of the Dark Iron Bloodline? Feng was shocked as he tried to process the changes to his body. There was no doubt that he was extremely excited, but before this feeling could reach its peak, a wave of serenity assaulted his mind, giving him instant peace. Even his perception of his environment had changed. He had previously needed to allocate the majority of his mental power to monitor his surroundings if he wanted to grasp movement around him accurately. However, despite investing only a small fraction of his attention, he could now gain an acute understanding of his environment. This improvement had exceeded Feng's expectations. Every expert capable of reaching the Void Realm in God's domain was capable of holding a high rank in a super guild. Experts that had just reached the Void Realm still had to focus on observing their environment. Even veteran Void Realm experts had to allocate a considerable amount of their mental fortitude to do so. Yet now, Feng did not even need to allocate half of his attention to achieve the same result. The boost from the Dark Iron Bloodline was truly terrifying. There was a limit to a person's mental power in both the real world and in God's domain. Not everyone could multitask. Experts, however, had this skill. Of course, they were limited to simple tasks when dividing their attention. If an expert encountered a complex problem, they would struggle to multitask. Needless to say, observing every movement in one's surroundings was a complex task. If a Void Realm expert only needed half of their focus to observe their surroundings and could allocate the other half to physical movement, their combat power would soar. Aside from the boost to his mental capacity, consuming the Dark Iron Bloodline had improved Feng's basic attributes. His strength had risen by 10%, agility by 7%, endurance, vitality, and intelligence by 5%. Although these were minor improvements, his total basic attributes would increase exponentially as he reached higher levels and tiers. Following which, Feng executed a few slashes at the empty air. As he did, his swords drew soundless, beautiful arcs of light before him. Sure enough, not only had the bloodline improved my basic attributes, but it's also improved my reaction speed. Before this, my reaction time had peaked at 0.1 seconds. Now I should peak at 0.8 seconds. Bloodlines truly are amazing. It's no wonder why the various superpowers were so desperate for bloodlines in the past. Feng could not help his rueful sigh as he watched the lingering afterimages of his blade. Although it was only a 0.2 second improvement to his reaction time, to most expert players, it was like the difference between heaven and earth. Normally, only incredibly talented experts could cross the 0.1 second limit. He had only been able to react at most 10 times in 1 second in the past, but he could now react 12 times. Assuming that his physical limit wasn't a factor and his opponents only had a peak reaction time of 0.1 seconds, the 2 extra reactions would allow him to outmaneuver his opponents, utterly overwhelming them. Had he obtained a basic bloodline in his previous life, he could have easily succeeded with his Tier 4 promotion, even if his early development had been lacking. Unfortunately, bloodlines were even rarer than fragmented legendary items in God's domain. Following which, Feng spent the next 10 minutes or so getting used to the new changes. By the time he was satisfied, he was more than eager to resume his battle with the Shrine Knight. As soon as Feng re-entered the platform's central ring, the Shrine Knight awakened and charged at him with his greatsword raised. "Come. Let me test the Dark Iron Bloodline's strength." Feng could not help but grin as the Shrine Knight ran towards him. He immediately advanced to meet the NPC in battle. This time, however, Feng did not execute Sword's Orbit to deflect the Shrine Knight's frenzied assault. Instead, he defended himself with normal swings of his blades. As the swords clashed, sparks and clangs filled the platform once more. Although Feng couldn't execute his attacks instinctively as the Shrine Knight did, he could make up for the missing attacks by relying on his superior reaction speed. As Feng exchanged blows with the Shrine Knight, he gradually became comfortable with his defense. After 3 minutes of battle, he had gone from a passive position to fighting the Shrine Knight on equal footing. Moreover, he had a lot more energy to spare than he had during the previous encounter as he executed void steps to dodge a portion of the Shrine Knight's attacks. The Shrine Knight, who had worn an indifferent expression thus far, now revealed his astonishment. "It seems that this is my current limit. Although I still have energy to spare, I haven't mastered enough combat techniques. I still can't exhibit the bloodline's full power. I'll have to find an opportunity to learn more techniques later." After fighting the Shrine Knight for some time, Feng fully understood what he still needed. Now that he had reviewed his strengths and weaknesses, he adjusted his swings and began to execute Sword's Orbit. Every attack with Sword's Orbit was nearly instinctive. As a result, the speed of Feng's slashes had reached its limit. Suddenly, a cut split the skin on the Shrine Knight's shoulder. The NPC's HP fell by roughly 3,000. After the first cut, it didn't take long for the second, third, and fourth to appear as well. As more cuts split the Shrine Knight's skin, his HP plummeted. Before 10 minutes had passed, the NPC's 1 million HP had fallen to 0. The NPC then collapsed, turned to stone, and shattered. In the blink of an eye, Feng was alone on the platform. Once the Shrine Knight was gone, Feng moved forward to collect his reward. Fortunately, the damaged item turned out to be a god crystal. However, when Feng plucked the god crystal from its crystalline prison, he noticed that the god crystal radiated far more divine might than any he had obtained before. An advanced god crystal? When Feng inspected the item, he realized why the trial had been so challenging. The power of God in an advanced god crystal was far denser than in ordinary god crystals. One advanced god crystal was the equivalent of 2 ordinary god crystals, and naturally, it wasn't any less valuable than a piece of ordinary epic equipment. Now he only needed one more god crystal to remove the mysterious power suppressing the disintegration armor. System, congratulations. You have completed the shrine's trial. You now have 2 options. 1. Exit the shrine. 2. Challenge another trial at the cost of 1,000 minutes. Feng chose option 2 without hesitation when he saw the system notification. After all, he needed another god crystal. This time, however, the trial was much less difficult. This Shrine Knight had only reached the flowing water realm, and as a result, he defeated the NPC very easily. After Feng secured his 3rd god crystal from the epic shrine, he received a notification that he had reached his challenge limit for epic shrines and was teleported out of the shrine without having any say in the matter. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc. Chapter 1590, Feng returns. Chapter 1590 Feng returns. Outside of the epic shrine Feng had previously entered, the space before the shrine's doors shattered. A figure began to emerge from the spatial tear, clumsily falling to the ground. 3 challenges is the limit? Feng gave the epic shrine's doors a bitter smile. This world summit is really stingy. He had thought that he could challenge the epic shrine's trials as long as he still had enough time remaining, but it seemed that that wasn't the case. Even if he had enough time, he could only enter 3 epic shrines per visit. In addition, there was a 10-day cooldown after he used his 3 changes, which would only decrease while he was in the World Summit and included all epic shrines. But after giving the matter some thought, Feng found it reasonable. The World Summit was a land of treasure. Even fragmented legendary items were available here, let alone epic items. As players reached higher levels, they'd grow stronger, and in turn they'd be able to earn more time from the entrance test. If the system allowed players to visit the epic shrines without limit, they'd ruin God's domain's economy. It was only normal for the system to create limitations. These restrictions were particularly important when dealing with players who wielded special items. Take Feng's Moloch's ring for example. While demon players had to complete a large number of rare and challenging quests to earn visitation rights to the World Summit, Feng could simply teleport here. With Moloch's ring, Feng had to face far fewer challenges to obtain the World Summit's treasures. Forget it. In any case, I've achieved my goal. It's about time that I return, Feng thought as he gazed at the 3 god crystals in his bag. He then took out a White River City return scroll and activated it. Although he still had more than enough time to visit a few dark gold shrines, he had spent quite a bit of time away from the God's Domain continent already. Now that he had achieved his goal and gained an unexpected windfall, he had no reason to linger in the World Summit. It was far more important for him to complete the Recast the Disintegration Armor quest. Otherwise, he'd have to deal with the constant annoyance of the mutated orcs that would target him in the fields, restricting his movement. With a flash of light, Feng vanished from the World Summit. Starmoon Kingdom, White River City. When Feng opened his eyes, he stood in White River City's teleportation hall. As Feng moved along the city streets, he noticed that White River City had far more players than several days ago. Many of the new arrivals were merchant players, and plenty of well-known adventurer teams had traveled here from other kingdoms and empires. Players' average level had also visibly increased. Now many of the players exploring White River City had reached level 45. Feng even spotted level 46 and 47 independent players. In addition, the sight of players atop mounts had become more common in the city. During his last visit, only expert players had owned mounts, but now many elite players had mounts of their own. However, with the increase of White River City's player population, Feng discovered quite a few cloaked players that stood out from the crowd. What made these players stand out in Feng's eyes was their interest in the players that wore Zero Wing's guild emblem. Killing intent would flash in their eyes whenever they spotted a Zero Wing member. By the looks of it, Zero Wing's members were just as wary of these cloaked players. It felt as if a fight would break out between them at any moment. As Feng pondered the city's new, strange atmosphere, Aqua Rose contacted him. "Guild leader, you've finally returned." Aqua Rose was visibly excited when she saw Feng's face. "What's going on in White River City? Why do I feel like the city is polluted with killing intent?" Feng asked as he glanced around him. It's all because of Blackwater and Heaven's Burial. Roughly 10 hours ago they doubled the bounty on our guild members. It's tempted many dark and independent players from other kingdoms and empires to take action against us. Now, everyone's hunting our guild members. Some have even found opportunities to strike while in White River City. At this point, other players have ambushed and killed dozens of our core members. Aqua Rose helplessly explained. While Feng had been gone, Zero Wing's expenditures had grown massively due to the war with Heaven's Burial and Zero Wing City's construction costs. Zero Wing had spent practically every coin it earned from the Candlelight Trading Firm, Stone Forest Town, and Zero Wing City in one way or another. The guild had no way to keep up with the increased bounty. How generous of Blackwater and Heaven's Burial. Feng was astonished. By doubling the bounty, each of Zero Wing's normal members was worth 40 silver, while elite members were worth 2 gold, and killing a core member could earn a player 20 gold. 20 gold. Not even the majority of God's Domain's experts earn 20 gold per day, yet now one could earn that many coins by killing one of Zero Wing's core members. In addition, players would earn a piece of top-tier equipment when they killed one of these core members. It was no wonder why other kingdoms and empires' dark players had set their sights on White River City. After all, White River City housed the highest number of Zero Wing members. Besides, these dark players wouldn't have an opportunity to strike in Stone Forest Town or Zero Wing City. Without the ruling guild's approval, players couldn't wear black cloaks in guild towns and cities. The ruling guild usually killed anyone who wore a black cloak without any repercussions. The only places in which these players could strike were the fields and White River City. Of the two options, it was easier to find Zero Wing members in the city. Although it was risky to attack another player in an NPC city, the potential profits were just as high. Countless dark and independent players would be willing to take the risk. "Guild leader, we've almost run out of guild funds. We are also running out of top-tier weapons and equipment for trade. The situation had disheartened many of our guild mates. We really cannot afford to allow this situation to continue. Why don't we change the direction of our guild's development a little and send more members to the Black Dragon and Apocalypse Empires?" Aqua Rose suggested. Although Zero Wing made a lot of coins from Stone Forest Town and Zero Wing City, there was a limit to how much top-tier equipment they could purchase. Furthermore, due to the constant fighting with Heaven's Burial and Blackwater's experts, Zero Wing's ability to gather top-tier equipment and rare materials from team dungeons had weakened. If this persisted, it was only a matter of time before Zero Wing crumbled. "No. Since Heaven's Burial and Blackwater want to increase their bounty, we'll increase ours as well. We'll see who will remain standing in the end," Feng said, shaking his head. "Also, notify Melancholic and have her prepare these materials for me. Gather every advanced forger we have as well. But we have very little spare capital remaining. If we increase our bounty, we'll run out of funds very quickly," Aqua Rose said worriedly. Currently, Zero Wing's emergency funds only amounted to 22,000 gold. This even included the rent they had received from merchant players in Zero Wing City. If they increased the bounty on Heaven's Burial's members, that might not even last them one more day. If Zero Wing couldn't pay the bounties, its reputation would suffer. "Relax. I have a way to deal with the money problem. Just make the announcement." Feng simply smiled in response to Aqua Rose's question. He then disconnected the call and made his way towards the Candlelight Trading Firm. Chapter 1591, Producing the Conqueror's Armor. Chapter 1591, Producing the Conqueror's Armor. After Feng disconnected the call, Aqua Rose stared at the dark screen before her in stunned silence. Increasing their bounty on Heaven's Burial's members was easier said than done. The additional expenditure would easily reach tens of thousands of gold. The guild did rake in quite a bit of money from Zero Wing City. Currently, it earned more than 5,000 gold through the entrance fees alone. However, due to the war of attrition with Heaven's Burial, Zero Wing struggled to make ends meet. Unless the guild gained an additional 100,000 gold, it couldn't feasibly afford to double the bounty on Heaven's Burial. Where, exactly, were they supposed to get another 100,000 gold? Big Sis Aqua, are we really going to double the bounty? Yaya asked carefully from beside Aqua Rose. Zero Wing only had a little over 20,000 gold set aside for emergencies. If they used these funds, the guild would be in an even more precarious situation should something unexpected occur. Make the announcement, Aqua Rose said, releasing a deep, powerless sigh. Even if we don't raise the bounty, our remaining stock of top-tier equipment in the guild warehouse won't last long. If we don't increase the bounty, we'll only burn through our stock. If we're doomed either way, we might as well duke it out with Heaven's Burial and Blackwater. Following which, Yaya posted the increased bounty on Starmoon Kingdom's official forums. As the news spread, it attracted the attention of every player in Starmoon Kingdom. Yaya's post quickly garnered over 1 million views. Is Zero Wing really trying to fight it out with Heaven's Burial? It actually followed Heaven's Burial's lead and doubled its bounty. It seems that Zero Wing is finally getting serious. Heaven's Burial has Blackwater's support, so it's expected that the guild has a massive amount of funding. But how has Zero Wing secured so much money? Maybe Zero Wing's putting up a final struggle, trying to scare Heaven's Burial into backing off? Based on what I've heard, Blackwater mobilized a bunch of experts to help Heaven's Burial and offered the guild an additional 200,000 gold. With the income from Ancient Rock City, how can Zero Wing possibly beat Heaven's Burial in wealth? Indeed. I've heard that Ancient Rock City's player population has already exceeded 6 million. Although Heaven's Burial isn't charging entrance fees, it's still making a ton of money through repair and accommodation fees. Let them raise their bounties on each other. The higher the better. That way I can earn enough money to buy my mount. In the public eye, Zero Wing was at an overwhelming disadvantage in its war with Heaven's Burial. And yet everyone celebrated the war. It wasn't every day that players had such a golden opportunity to make money. Orc Empire Heaven's Burial's residence in Ancient Rock City. Guild Leader Singular, it seems that Zero Wing has quite the budget as well. Are you sure that you won't have any issues? Lei Jingyang could not help his frown as he read the latest forum post from Zero Wing. To whittle down Zero Wing's strength as quickly as possible, Heaven's Burial had doubled its bounty on the other guild's members. This increased the number of bounties they had to pay by several times. Each day they had to shell out roughly 60,000 gold in bounties. That was the equivalent of several days of Ancient Rock City's income. Despite what the public thought, Heaven's Burial wasn't as secure as it seemed. Young Master Lei, rest assured, I am very familiar with what Zero Wing is capable of. Based on the reports from my spies in the guild, Zero Wing doesn't have much money left. It's already struggling to maintain its current expenditures. This is merely Zero Wing's final act of defiance, Singular Burial said, not particularly surprised to hear that Zero Wing had doubled its bounty. I've also reached an agreement with Blackwater. Not only have they invested 200,000 gold in Heaven's Burial, but they also intend to send another 300,000 gold later. 500,000 gold coins is more than enough to crush Zero Wing. Besides, we've also located a new mine in the Orc Empire. That mine has a magic iron vein and a certain chance of producing magic crystals. As long as we capture the mine, Zero Wing has no hope of outlasting us, even if it gains the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's full support. Magic iron veins were one of the few veins that produced magic crystals, and the vein Heaven's Burial had discovered was only a dozen or so hours walk away from Ancient Rock City. Although other superpowers had discovered the vein as well, their guild towns were much farther away. As a result, these superpowers couldn't compete with Heaven's Burial. I guess you're right. But as a precaution, we should move up our timetable. The other superpowers have already shown interest in the magic iron vein, and although we have the terrain advantage, securing the vein won't be easy. Lei Jingyang nodded his agreement. He was starting to think that he may have overestimated Zero Wing a little. Although Zero Wing was powerful, the guild lacked the support of a major corporation. It relied on its own power. Meanwhile, in White River City's candlelight trading firm, as Feng entered one of the special forging rooms on the building's top floor, he noticed Melancholic Smile and nearly 100 other advanced forgers waiting for him. Guild leader, I've withdrawn all of the materials you've requested from the warehouse. The candlelight trading firm is also purchasing the materials in bulk, Melancholic Smile reported as she approached Feng, gesturing to the various materials piled around the special forging room. The materials Melancholic had gathered in the special forging room were none other than the required materials for crafting the Conqueror's armor. The Conqueror's armor's production process was intensely complex. Among the various processes, the most time-consuming were the smelting and material refinement. Fortunately, these tasks could be completed by forgers who hadn't learned the Conqueror's armor forging design, which was precisely why Feng had called upon these forgers to assist. With this, he could focus on forging the Conqueror's armor, saving plenty of time. However, when Feng considered the material's purity, he decided that it'd be best if he left the smelting and refinement to advanced forgers. Good. Put whatever tasks you're currently working on hold for now. I need all of you to smelt these materials, Feng addressed the advanced forgers. He then turned to Melancholic Smile and asked, "How is the market for lunar potions right now?" Lunar potions? Shaking her head, Melancholic Smile said, "Although the lunar potion is common, demand has skyrocketed due to the increase in players exploring ruins, yet the Moonlight Flower, the lunar potion's main material, is quite rare. As a result, the Moonlight Flower's market price has increased drastically. Now each flower sells for 6 silver. As for the lunar potion, it's sold for 12 silver. Although we've tried to purchase the flowers to produce lunar potions, we've only crafted a little over 2,000 bottles thus far." The various large guilds urgently needed lunar potions, but due to the Moonlight Flower's rarity, it was impossible to acquire in large quantities. The fact that the candlelight trading firm had accumulated a stock of over 2,000 lunar potions was impressive. So it's finally begun. Feng smiled. The Moonlight Flower's price was already higher than he had expected. Following which, he retrieved the Moonlight Flowers he had stored in his epic spatial bag in Spacetime Herb Garden. "Use these to brew lunar potions and sell them for now. Send all of the money to Aqua to cope with our current predicament." Feng had used the Spacetime Herb Garden to grow Moonlight Flowers ever since he obtained it. With the Herb Garden's increased survival rates, the Moonlight Flowers he planted had a 25% survival rate. As a result, each harvest netted around 15,000 Moonlight Flowers. He had already collected over 350,000 in total. Since each stack consisted of 100 flowers, he had 3,521 stacks of Moonlight Flowers. When Melancholic Smile saw the stacks of Moonlight Flowers Feng had revealed, her jaw dropped. It was difficult enough to purchase a few dozen Moonlight Flowers from the market, yet Feng had pulled over 3,000 stacks from his bag, almost filling hers. If they used all of these Moonlight Flowers to brew lunar potions, they'd definitely make a fortune. Chapter 1592, Frantic Purchase. Chapter 1592, Frantic Purchase. After receiving Feng's instructions, Melancholic Smile promptly left the special forging room and contacted every advanced alchemist in the candlelight trading firm, passing on the order to begin the lunar potions mass production. At the same time, Melancholic Smile retrieved the stockpiled lunar potions from the trading firm's warehouse and had her subordinates sell them in Zero Wing's advanced auction house and White River City's auction house. In addition, she sent a few other players to the Black Dragon Empire and other kingdoms to sell the potions. Not only could they sell the lunar potions quickly by doing so, but they could also maintain the market value. Meanwhile, in another of the candlelight trading firm's special forging rooms, Feng took out the Philosopher's Stone, which he had retrieved from his private warehouse earlier, and began to synthesize mana barrier crystals from the mana barrier crystal fragments. Feng had obtained a total of 45 mana barrier crystal fragments from his latest trip to the World Summit. If he had NPC alchemists help synthesize the mana barrier crystals for him, they'd only have a 40% success rate, and each attempt required 10 crystal fragments. He'd be lucky to end up with 2 mana barrier crystals. On the other hand, the Philosopher's Stone provided a 100% synthesis success rate. However, something unexpected and shocking happened when Feng synthesized the first batch of crystal fragments. After placing only 5 crystal fragments into the Philosopher's Stone, a complete mana barrier crystal had appeared on the table before him. What? I only need 5 crystal fragments to form a complete crystal. Feng was astounded as he stared at the mana barrier crystal on the table. If he only needed 5 crystal fragments, he could synthesize 9 complete mana barrier crystals. Meanwhile, teleportation arrays like those in White River City's teleportation hall needed 5 magic crystals for each activation. Hence, they would also need 5 mana barrier crystals to operate normally. As for the 4 Towers of Elements teleportation function, it only needed 3 magic crystals. Originally, Feng had planned to activate the teleportation function only after he had gathered enough mana barrier crystals. After all, It was simply impossible to sustain the teleportation array's consumption with Zero Wing's current magic crystal income. Now, however, it would seem that that was no longer necessary. Fortunately, he could use 9 mana barrier crystals interchangeably. Moreover, in addition to the mana barrier crystal's self-recovery ability, each mana barrier crystal contained as much mana as 100 magic crystals. Feng immediately contacted Melancholic Smile and had her send Aqua Rose the synthesized crystals and a message to activate the 4 Towers of Elements teleportation functions. Once he finished with the mana barrier crystals, Feng took out the Conqueror's armor forging design and began to study. Unlike basic forging designs, players couldn't learn advanced forging designs with the click of a button. Advanced forging designs also contain special forging techniques and magic arrays. Players needed to learn all of these details themselves. This thing is really complex. After looking through the Conqueror's armor's production process, Feng was astonished. It's no wonder why players struggled so hard to produce equipment with battle arrays in the past. So, the process of creating the battle arrays involves advanced magic arrays. Fortunately, I didn't leave the Conqueror's armor's production to Coco and the others. Otherwise, it'd take even longer to craft the armor. Basic magic arrays in God's domain were quite complex, and even experts needed a considerable amount of time to grasp the skills required to craft them. Needless to say, intermediate magic arrays were even more complex. Otherwise, Feng wouldn't have left the secret silver-ranked secret technique tablet in the guild's warehouse instead of putting it to use. Even now, Zero Wing didn't have enough players who could draw the intermediate magic arrays. Throughout Zero Wing, only Feng knew how to draw advanced magic arrays thus far. Everyone else was still a long distance away from being able to draw them effectively. Fortunately, the required advanced magic array isn't too difficult to draw. I should be able to learn it in a few hours. Feng breathed a sigh of relief after examining the necessary advanced magic array. Although he could already draw advanced magic arrays, there were simple and complex versions. Feng could draw the simple arrays in a handful of hours, but he might not be able to learn a complex advanced magic array yet with his current standards. If he couldn't draw the required advanced magic array, he wouldn't be able to forge the Conqueror's armor. Although it appeared as though Zero Wing and Heaven's Burial were competing via wealth, in reality, that wasn't the case. The true competition still lay among the guild's experts. Due to Lei Jingyang's partnership with Heaven's Burial, the guild had recruited a lot of expert players. Now Heaven's Burial also had the assistance of a large number of Blackwater's experts. As a result, the gap between Zero Wing and Heaven's Burial's strengths had grown. Unfortunately, Zero Wing didn't have enough Tier 2 experts to deal with the enemy's overwhelming numbers. Even if Feng took up arms personally, there was very little he could do to change the situation. But it would be a different story if Zero Wing had the Conqueror's armor. If 5 elite players wore the armor, they would immediately rise to expert status. They might even become more powerful than ordinary expert players. If Zero Wing equipped their ordinary expert players with the armor and activated the basic strength battle array, they'd be as strong as the guild's first-rate experts. If all 5 worked together, they might even display more overall combat power than 5 Refinement Realm experts working together. Refinement Realm experts. Even in super guilds, experts of such caliber were invaluable. In current first-rate guilds, such experts would rank among the top in strength. While Feng studied the Conqueror's armor's advanced magic array, Melancholic Smile posted every lunar potion she had on hand for sale in the various empires and kingdoms auction houses. She only sold 100 bottles in each location, setting the minimum bid at 10 silver per bottle, slightly cheaper than market value. When these potions went public in the various auction houses, they attracted many guilds and teams' attention. Someone's actually selling so many lunar potions. So cheap. This is wonderful. With these potions, our team can finally explore the ancient ruin we found. Excited, players furiously began to bid on the lunar potions. To the current adventurer teams and guilds, ruin exploration had become a golden opportunity to make a fortune, but without the lunar potion or something similar, exploring the dark ruins was troublesome. Every ruin had its own traps, and locating these traps in the dark was dangerous. If players triggered these traps, even an expert-led team could suffer severe damage or be annihilated. Compared to the risk of triggering these traps, the lunar potion's cost was nothing. After all, players would need several days to recover a lost level at this stage of the game. As players discovered the lunar potions in the auction houses, the potions' prices quickly skyrocketed. 10 silver 40 copper. 10 silver 70 copper. 11 silver 20 copper. After a few short minutes, the average price had reached 12 silver 50 copper. Meanwhile, this increase was just the beginning. In the end, players only stopped contesting for the lunar potions after the prices reached 17 silver 50 copper. This was already far beyond the current market value. Although not every lunar potion had sold for 17 silver 50 copper, on average they had sold for 16 silver 40 copper or more. After deducting the processing fees, Zero Wing still earned a considerable profit. In the end, Melancholic Smile had made a massive 262 gold from the 2,000 lunar potions she had sold. Fortunately, she had barely dented the market's demand for the lunar potions. 2,000 potions weren't nearly enough to quench players' thirst in a single kingdom, much less multiple kingdoms and empires. Chapter 1593, Zero Wing City's True Power. Chapter 1593, Zero Wing City's True Power. After the first batch of lunar potions had sold, none were available in the various auction houses. Because of this, regret ravaged the players who had failed to win the potions. Crap. The lunar potions have sold out already? I just got here. Damn it. I knew I shouldn't have waited. If I had just bought 2 or 3 bottles, our team would have had enough for an expedition. Many players had assumed that the lunar potions had come from some guild or trading firm. After all, no single player would be able to sell 100 bottles at a time. If that were the case, there was a high likelihood that another batch would show up in the auction houses sooner or later. However, even after over half an hour, no one had posted any new lunar potions. Meanwhile, Melancholic Smile, who was currently in the candlelight trading firm, was elated. The speed at which players are buying the potions is really frightening. With this, we won't need to worry about not being able to sell the potions in bulk. When Melancholic Smile received the proceeds from her subordinates, she brimmed with confidence regarding the large number of moonlight flowers in her possession. Although the candlelight trading firm produced a large number of items each day, not all of these items sold the moment they were put up for sale. They needed to let the market slowly digest some of these items. In fact, some items might never sell, collecting dust in the trading firm. However, the lunar potion was a different story. This first round of sales had proven that as long as the candlelight trading firm crafted lunar potions, the market would devour their stock. Meanwhile, the candlelight trading firm had almost 100 advanced alchemists. With enough materials, mass-producing the lunar potions would be a piece of cake for these alchemists. In fact, while the first batch of lunar potions had sold, Silent Wonder and the others had brewed over 2,000 new bottles. With this production speed, the candlelight trading firm should earn around 200 or 300 gold per hour. With 48 hours per day in God's domain, the firm could make over 10,000 gold per day with the lunar potions alone. Although this amount of money couldn't change the war's overall situation, it was enough to resolve Zero Wing's current predicament. When Melancholic Smile gave the command to sell the second batch of lunar potions, an intense competition raged in the various kingdoms and empires' auction houses. The players that had previously adopted a wait-and-see attitude discarded the notion. They did everything in their power to get their hands on the potions for fear that they'd miss this opportunity. The lunar potions prices soared once again. The highest price during the first batch had climbed to 17 silver, 50 copper, but now it rose to 19 silver per bottle. By the time the 2,000 lunar potions sold out, Melancholic Smile had earned an additional 300 plus gold. Meanwhile, Aqua Rose was swamped with work in Zero Wing City. Big Sis Aqua, we've paid out over 1,300 gold since we've updated the bounty. Including the remaining funds we have set aside, we won't last another 2 days, Yaya worriedly reported as she examined the bounty claims summary in her hands. It's increased by so much? Aqua Rose could not help but frown. The increased bounty claims were far higher than she had expected. She had hoped that they would last a few more days in this war with the income from Zero Wing City and the guild's remaining funds, but it seemed that wouldn't be possible. Even if Heaven's Burial didn't mobilize its army, Zero Wing would crumble if it ran out of money. The guild's reputation would be in tatters. To make matters worse, Heaven's Burial's ancient rock city became more popular as time passed. Not only could players level up in the area, but they could also earn contribution points to purchase valuable items. In contrast, Zero Wing City's location was only suitable for leisure right now. Big Sis Aqua, under the guild leader's orders, the candlelight trading firm has sent a representative with coins and items. Apparently, these should help us hold out for a little while longer, Yaya suddenly announced. They've sent funds? Good. I'll head over to meet them immediately. Aqua Rose breathed a sigh of relief when she heard that Feng had sent additional funds. She ran to the guild hall's lobby to receive the coins and items. Although she didn't know how Feng had obtained the additional funding, another 40 or 50,000 gold would help Zero Wing endure this war for a few more days. During that time, they could organize an auction to sell some of Zero Wing City's private housing. That might allow them to continue this fight with Heaven's Burial. They might even be able to put an end to this war. Heaven's Burial invested quite a bit of money each day as well, and no one wanted to see this drag on. However, when Aqua Rose saw the coins Melancholic Smile's subordinate had traded to her, she was dumbfounded. For a moment she wondered if she had misread the total. 500 gold. To a small guild or adventurer team, 500 gold might be a considerable amount of money, but to Zero Wing, this was nothing more than pocket change. It was far from enough to pull Zero Wing from its current predicament. Is this supposed to help me hold out for another half an hour? Aqua Rose was speechless as she stared at the 500 gold. But when Aqua Rose noticed the 9 mana barrier crystals in her bag and inspected their attribute panels, her eyes began to glow. Everlasting magic crystals? Aqua Rose couldn't believe her eyes. She immediately contacted Feng and asked, Guild leader, just where did you get these mana barrier crystals? Do you have more of them? God's Domain's various guilds and players were all in desperate need of magic crystals, and Zero Wing was certainly no exception. Yet not only were these mana barrier crystals the equivalent of 100 magic crystals, but they could also be used repeatedly. This was akin to having a miniature magic crystal vein. Furthermore, these mana barrier crystals only needed 48 hours to replenish their energy. They basically gave Zero Wing a stable income of 900 magic crystals per day. If they stored the mana barrier crystals in a location with sufficient mana density, their cooldowns would be even shorter. Although the mana barrier crystals could not be used in places like the Divine Colosseum, they were extremely valuable. You've already received them? Seeing Aqua Rose's excitement, Feng smiled bitterly as he said, Mana barrier crystals are extremely rare items. Obtaining more is impossible at the moment. Naturally, Aqua Rose was a little disappointed to hear this. If they had 50 or 60 mana barrier crystals, Zero Wing would be set for life. However, after giving the matter some thought, she found it reasonable. If it were possible to obtain something as valuable as mana barrier crystals in large quantities, it would throw God's Domain's market into chaos. Use the 9 mana barrier crystals to operate the 4 Towers of Elements teleportation array for now. With the mana barrier crystals and some additional magic crystals, we should be able to sustain the teleportation array's consumption easily. Feng could sympathize with Aqua Rose's desire for the mana barrier crystals, but they simply weren't that easy to obtain. Let the public know that Zero Wing City will activate a teleportation function that can transport players anywhere within 4 million yards of the city. The cost will be 5 silver coins per 1 million yards per person. At the same time, set up a membership system for the teleportation function. Those who wish to become members can pay a one-time membership fee of 20 magic crystals. In return, they'll get a 20% discount when using the teleportation function. Currently, Stone Forest Town and Team Dungeons were Zero Wing's main income source for magic crystals, but both Stone Forest Town and Zero Wing City needed a lot of magic crystals to operate. Furthermore, the guild had to sustain the daily magic crystal allocation for its members. It was practically impossible to sustain the 4 Towers of Elements' teleportation function with the guild's current magic crystal income. Although not every player would pay 20 magic crystals to become a member, Zero Wing would be fine as long as it earned enough magic crystals to sustain the 4 Towers of Elements teleportation function. Alright, I'll get it done right away. Aqua Rose nodded excitedly. She had waited to launch of the 4 Towers of Elements' teleportation function for a long time. Unfortunately, Zero Wing hadn't had enough magic crystals to sustain the teleportation array until now. Now that they had the mana barrier crystals, they could finally show off Zero Wing City's true power. Chapter 1594, Surging Towards Zero Wing City. Chapter 1594, Surging Towards Zero Wing City. Starmoon Kingdom, Starmoon City. Light flashed in the teleportation hall as a team of 20 players arrived in the lively Starmoon City. When these players appeared, many players in the hall turned to look. All of these 20 players' levels were impressively high, and they were well equipped. The lowest level among them was level 47, while the most inferior equipment was level 45 fine gold rank. The pair leading the team, a man and a woman, were even more awe-inspiring. Both were level 49 and wore nothing but level 45 dark gold equipment. Not even first-rate guild's experts could compare to this team. Most surprisingly, none of these experts wore a guild emblem, showing that they were all independent players. What a powerful team. Who are they? Don't you see the Flaming Fox logo sewn on their cloaks? They're members of Firecloud Fox, one of the top 50 adventurer teams in the Black Dragon Empire. That shield warrior in the lead is Remnant Cloud, Firecloud Fox's commander. He is one of the Black Dragon Empire's top 100 shield warriors. I've heard that several first-rate guilds in the Empire have offered high prices to recruit him, but he's refused every one. Since they're from an adventurer team in the Black Dragon Empire, why are they here in Starmoon Kingdom? Because of Stone Forest Town. The town's battle arena is a perfect place for experts like them to train. I've also heard that Firecloud Fox plans to move its headquarters to Zero Wing City. Although Zero Wing City's battle arena isn't as effective as the one in Stone Forest Town, the city's mana density is much higher. When the players in the hall saw Firecloud Fox's members, they all fell into heated discussions. Some players, members of other adventurer teams, gazed at Firecloud Fox's members with envy and admiration. Even first-rate guilds fought to recruit these experts. It was an honor that few adventurer teams received. It really is annoying to travel to and from the Orc Empire every time. Commander, can't we grind somewhere else next time? Graceful Moon, Firecloud Fox's vice-commander, suggested, paying no attention to the gossip around her. Turning to Remnant Cloud, she continued, the Orcs' invasion is getting worse, and over the past few days, we've come across more and higher quality Orcs. It'll definitely affect our leveling speed. In your dreams. If we don't continue questing in the Orc Empire and kill Heaven's Burial's members, how are we supposed to earn the money for our mounts? Remnant Cloud snapped. Although the Orcs upgrade had affected our leveling speed, opportunities like this don't happen often. Alright, enough complaining. Let's head to Zero Wing City to claim our bounties. I get what you're trying to say, but you've seen the difference for yourself. Those Orcs are growing more powerful. At first, we usually only encountered elite-ranked Orcs, but now we've run into chieftains left and right. Their combat standards have improved as well. I'm willing to bet that we'll need to waste several more hours to cross the border the next time we try to enter the Orc Empire, Graceful Moon grumbled. Despite the short distance between Starmoon Kingdom's border towns and the Orc Empire's border, their adventurer team had spent a significant amount of time crossing the border due to Orc patrol squads. To make matters worse, the quantity and quality of patrol squads continued to increase as well. Now they spend half of their travel time on fighting the Orc patrol squads. Alright, if they've grown stronger by the time we try to cross the border again, we'll find another location to grind and quest. In any case, our adventurer team has earned quite a bit. With today's haul, we should have enough to purchase a private house in Zero Wing City, Remnant Cloud said. After giving the matter some more thought, he saw the logic in Graceful Moon's concerns. While earning money was important, it wouldn't do them any good if it came at the cost of their leveling speed. If the Orcs guarding the border grew even stronger, leveling in the Orc Empire would no longer be worth it. In fact, based on what information he had, several adventurer teams, which were only slightly weaker than Firecloud Fox, had already given up on the Orc Empire and opted to grind in other maps. These other adventurer teams' level speed was now slightly faster than his own teams. As Remnant Cloud and his companions prepared to head to Zero Wing City, they overheard nearby players discussing their destination. Is Zero Wing for real? Zero Wing City can actually do that. It can't be true. How could a city possibly teleport players to any location within 4 million yards? If that were possible, wouldn't players be able to teleport to their desired leveling areas instantly? Zero Wing made the announcement personally. Why wouldn't it be true? Players would see through it immediately if this were some kind of ruse. Besides, didn't you see it? The teleportation fee is absurd. Ordinary players barely earn anything each day. If we want to use the teleportation function, we'll have to hand over a whole day's earnings to Zero Wing. Zero Wing is too strong. It actually secured something like this too. As expected of our kingdom's #1 guild. The players on Starmoon City streets debated Zero Wing's latest announcement. Meanwhile, the numerous adventurer teams in the city burned with excitement over the news. Zero Wing City's location was no longer news to Starmoon Kingdom's players. The city wasn't far from the front lines of this war between the Orc Empire and Star Moon Kingdom. For the most part, only a large forest separated the city from the front lines. Being able to teleport to any location within 4 million yards of the city would allow players to travel beyond the kingdom's border, bypassing many of the Orc patrol squads. This would save players plenty of travel time and allow them to avoid quite a bit of danger. The teleportation's cost was the only downside. If players teleported across the maximum range, one trip would cost 20 silver per person. However, the price was definitely worth the trip for capable adventurer teams. They could easily earn back several times the money they had spent with the time they saved. After all, Zero Wing had placed a bounty on Heaven's Burial's members. They could earn back the teleportation fees by killing a bunch of the guild's members easily. Moreover, the Orc Empire's maps had far more resources than most of Star Moon Kingdom's. They'd also be able to increase their leveling speed. "Commander, it seems that we'll have to save a bit more coins to buy a private house in Zero Wing City," Graceful Moon said, chuckling after she read Zero Wing's announcement. "Zero Wing isn't giving us a chance. How wonderful would it have been if they had sold their private housing before this announcement?" While Remnant Cloud celebrated the news, he also felt a sting in his pockets. Zero Wing City had already offered amazing benefits, but now it also informed the public of its teleportation function. Needless to say, adventurer teams and experts who wanted to level in the Orc Empire would flood Zero Wing City. To players like them, the teleportation function was a major resource, and 20 silver coins wasn't a significant expenditure. As long as they obtained 1 or 2 pieces of equipment to sell, they would easily earn back what they spent. Furthermore, players could purchase a membership to receive a 20% discount. In fact, Star Moon Kingdom's players wouldn't be the only ones interested in Zero Wing City's teleportation function. Players from other kingdoms and empires would likely visit Zero Wing City to travel to the Orc Empire. As it was, the orcs guarding all of the empire's borders were growing stronger. As Remnant Cloud fussed over how to earn enough money to purchase a private house in Zero Wing City, the adventurer teams and players in said city were in an uproar. These players, who had initially planned to walk to the Orc Empire, changed their minds immediately and made their way to the nearest 4 Towers of Elements. They then spent 20 silver to travel across Star Moon Kingdom's border. As more players proved the power of the 4 Towers of Elements teleportation function, more adventurer teams and expert players applied for the teleportation membership. 1 short hour after Zero Wing announced the teleportation function, 1,042 players had become members, contributing over 20,000 magic crystals. In total, over 2,000 players had used the teleportation function. Naturally, not everyone wanted to pay a portion of their teleportation fees in magic crystals. After subtracting the maintenance and energy costs, Zero Wing had earned 12 silver coins off of every player that had teleported over the maximum distance. In a single hour, Zero Wing had made over 240 gold in pure profit. However, the truly frightening result of Zero Wing's latest announcement was the number of players who visited Zero Wing City. In just 1 hour, Zero Wing City's player population had shot past the 2 million threshold. Many of these players belonged to adventurer teams from other kingdoms and empires, and in the end, Zero Wing had also earned a fortune from the entrance fees. Chapter 1595. Upgrading the Blacksteel Insignia. Chapter 1595. Upgrading the Blacksteel Insignia. The moment Zero Wing City revealed its teleportation function, the city attracted many major powers' attention. A large number of merchant players also considered conducting their business in Zero Wing City. Some of the guilds in the several kingdoms and 2 empires bordering the Orc Empire even tried to ally with Zero Wing in secret. The situation had completely exceeded Aqua Rose's expectations. All of these guilds offered to sell Zero Wing level 45, top-tier equipment at below market price in exchange for the right to establish a guild residence in Zero Wing City and a 20% discount on the teleportation fees. These guilds were also willing to pay a portion of the teleportation fees with magic crystals. Although mainstream players had already reached level 40, they were still some time from reaching level 45. Only the various guilds' elite members had reached such a high level, and because of this, level 45 fine gold equipment and above was still extremely rare. Although the equipment was available on the market, these pieces usually cost far more than market value. Moreover, there weren't many pieces available. Even if Zero Wing were willing to purchase the overpriced equipment, it wouldn't secure many pieces. Yet, these large guilds had offered level 45, top-tier equipment as payment. Aqua Rose had never expected this. If she accepted their offers, she'd solve the guild's shortage of funds and top-tier equipment. Furthermore, even after giving these guilds a 20% discount on teleportation fees, Zero Wing would still make quite a bit of profit. Guild leader, 3 first-rate guilds and 11 second-rate guilds have expressed interest in partnering with us thus far. If we agree, replenishing our top-tier equipment in the guild warehouse won't be an issue anymore, Aqua Rose said excitedly as she read the report in her hands. Rather than coins, Zero Wing urgently needed top-tier equipment for its war against Heaven's Burial. Every time their players died, they'd lose a piece of equipment. Occasionally, Heaven's Burial's members even used some special methods to force players to drop more than one piece when they died. Generally, Zero Wing compensated its members with GCPs, and these members would then trade their points for replacement weapons and equipment from the warehouse. Because of this, Zero Wing's members were rapidly depleting the guild's stock of weapons and equipment. If Zero Wing's guild warehouse ran out of top-tier weapons and equipment for its members, Zero Wing's GCPs would lose their value. If that happened, it would only be a matter of time before the guild crumbled. However, if Zero Wing could replenish its stock, Aqua Rose was confident that the guild could continue to duke it out with Heaven's Burial. There are so many guilds seeking an alliance? Aqua Rose's report surprised Feng. He hadn't thought that the 4 Towers of Elements teleportation function would be such an effective advertisement. Alright. However, they have to pay 25% of their teleportation fees with magic crystals. Otherwise, no deal. While the 4 Towers of Elements' teleportation function was powerful, its operation cost a lot of magic crystals. If he allowed these guilds to mass teleport their members, the 9 mana barrier crystals would drain in the blink of an eye. Zero Wing did not have many magic crystals to spare. If these guilds paid a quarter of their teleportation fees in magic crystals, they'd offset the additional cost. Zero Wing might even earn some magic crystal profit. I understand. I'll begin the negotiations right away. After Feng agreed, Aqua Rose disconnected the call and contacted the various large guilds' guild leaders. Meanwhile, the atmosphere among Zero Wing's members had lightened considerably due to the city's sudden popularity. Everyone's confidence of defeating Heaven's Burial renewed. They could easily imagine the future that awaited their guild city, and there was no way it would lose to Heaven's Burial's ancient rock city in any aspect. Similarly, Starmoon Kingdom's players had begun to change their minds about Zero Wing falling prey to Heaven's Burial. They now thought that Zero Wing had some hope of victory. While Aqua Rose negotiated the contract's terms with the various guild leaders, Feng had finally learned how to craft the new advanced magic array and had begun to forge the Conqueror's armor. Although Zero Wing had solved its money and equipment problems, it still wouldn't be easy to defeat Heaven's Burial and Blackwater. Feng didn't even think that his current guild could do anything to the 2 guilds. The difference between their expert counts was just too massive, not to mention financial strength. If Zero Wing wanted to end this war of attrition, it would have to rely on the strength of its guild members. In fact, this was God's domain's infallible truth. Otherwise, guilds wouldn't pay so much attention to nurturing their experts. Now that I've learned how to draw the magic array, I need to find a way to improve my success rate. Although it is somewhat wasteful, I'll have to upgrade the Blacksteel Insignia. When Feng had tried to forge the Conqueror's armor and saw his theoretical success rate, he steeled himself and made his way to White River City's bank. Forging the level 50 fine gold ranked Conqueror's armor would be even more challenging than forging level 50 dark gold equipment. Despite his status as a master forger, he only had a theoretical success rate of 18%. Even with his various support tools, he only increased that success rate to around 28%. Although it seemed relatively high, he'd be fortunate to succeed once out of every 5 attempts to produce the armor. This was due to the Conqueror's armor's complex forging process. Unfortunately, the required materials weren't cheap, and each attempt would cost around 50 gold. With that kind of money, he could already purchase a piece of level 45 fine gold equipment. Because the required materials were also rare and difficult to obtain, he also had a limited number of attempts. Feng simply couldn't bear to forge the Conqueror's armor with such a low success rate. If he had to craft the armor, he'd have to reach a 30% success rate at the very least. His only solution was the Holy Grail's power of evolution, which he could only use once every 10 days. Feng quickly arrived in his own large private warehouse and carefully retrieved Zero Wing's greatest secret weapon, the Holy Grail. He had planned to save the power of evolution to upgrade items with special abilities to epic rank, but he couldn't care less right now. He immediately retrieved the Blacksteel insignia and scanned it with the Holy Grail. Suddenly, purple fog leaked from the Holy Grail and enveloped the Blacksteel insignia. The system soon notified Feng of the evolution cost. System, are you willing to permanently lose 1000 HP to evolve the Blacksteel insignia? What? This thing actually requires 1000 HP? Feng was astonished. The Blacksteel insignia was currently fine gold rank. Even if he evolved the item, it would only become dark gold rank, yet the evolution cost was as high as the cost of evolving the Holy City's emblem. Losing 1000 HP was no trivial matter. It was the equivalent of losing 50 endurance permanently. Even a Tier 2 player would have to level a few times to make up for this loss. Moreover, the evolution's success wasn't guaranteed. There was still a chance of failure. But Feng did not hesitate long before he clicked, agree. He might have decided against evolving the Blacksteel insignia in the past, but now that he had the Dark Iron bloodline, things had changed. The bloodline provided some additional basic attribute points with each level up. Moreover, the bonus would grow as he reached higher levels. He could recover the lost 50 endurance very quickly. After Feng agreed to the evolution, the Holy Grail's purple fog wrapped around him. Immediately, Feng's maximum HP fell by 1000. Meanwhile, the Holy Grail radiated a purple glow as it absorbed the life force. Following which, plumes of purple fog seeped into the Blacksteel insignia. Suddenly, the Blacksteel insignia released a blinding glow that enveloped the private warehouse. This should mean it succeeded, right? Feng's heart pounded as he stared at the Blacksteel insignia in his hand. Chapter 1596, Budding Threat. Chapter 1596, Budding Threat. The Holy Grail's power of evolution did not have a 100% success rate. Moreover, the success rate would drop as Feng chose higher-ranked items. The cost would also increase. Even if the evolution failed, the Holy Grail would still have a 10-day cooldown. Although the Blacksteel insignia was only fine gold rank, it was an extremely precious support tool for forgers. It was far more valuable than ordinary dark gold items. Hence, in Feng's opinion, the success rate for evolving the Blacksteel insignia would be on par with evolving a dark gold item to epic rank. If the evolution failed, not only would he permanently lose 1000 HP, but he'd also have to wait another 10 days before he could attempt to evolve the Blacksteel insignia again. This was not a desired outcome. Following which, Feng took a deep breath as he clicked to inspect the Blacksteel insignia's attribute panel. Blacksteel insignia, dark gold rank. Unique equipment. User restriction, Feng. The Blacksteel insignia is the highest medal of honor amongst the Blacksteel dwarves. After equipping it, forging success rate increased by 10%, proficiency has a 15% chance to increase by 1 extra point. When forging, there is a 3% chance to increase the forged item's attributes. Feng breathed a sigh of relief when he saw the Blacksteel insignia's attributes. Ecstasy then gripped his heart. The dark gold ranked Blacksteel insignia is amazing. No wonder the evolution required so much HP. The Blacksteel insignia's upgraded attributes shocked Feng. Not only had the bonus forging success rate risen from 5% to 10%, but the chances of increasing a forged item's attributes had also increased from 1% to 3%. Now he'd have a considerably higher chance of improving his crafted item's attributes. In God's domain, producing higher rank items would become exponentially more difficult. Although it wouldn't be a direct rank increase, the Blacksteel insignia could raise a fine gold item's attributes to be only slightly inferior to a piece of dark gold equipment of the same level. This meant that the Blacksteel insignia's wielder could forge items 1 rank stronger than their intended rank. After dealing with the Blacksteel insignia, Feng returned to the candlelight trading firm to forge the Conqueror's armor. Meanwhile, an army of over 3,000 players, all level 46 or higher, assaulted an orc fortress within the Orc Empires. Although the orcs defending the fortress were around level 60 and ranked between elite and grand lord, they fell one after another under the players' fierce assault. Unfortunately, the players also suffered casualties. Focus on dodging the boss's skills. Ranged players destroy the fortress's defense turrets. Singular burial commanded from the rear of the army. As the orcs worked to strengthen their empire's defenses, they had constructed temporary fortresses as resting points for the armies. Because of this, more orcs operated around these temporary fortresses, troubling the players in the area. Meanwhile, the orcs' mines were usually surrounded by several temporary fortresses. If players wanted to secure an orc mine, they'd have to deal with the fortresses first. Singular Burial was confident that he could secure the orc mine, which many of God's domain superpowers drooled over, once Heaven's Burial dealt with the temporary fortresses. Once they succeeded, Heaven's Burial wouldn't have to worry about coins or magic crystals. Daybreak Fog, who wore a cyan mage robe, suddenly approached Singular Burial and quietly reported, "Guild leader, our spies in Zero Wing have reported that the guild has somehow obtained a teleportation function that allows players to teleport from Zero Wing City to the border between the Orc Empire and Starmoon Kingdom. With this teleportation function, players can save a massive amount of time. In fact, many players have already used the service, contributing to Zero Wing's wealth. Moreover, we've received news that plenty of guilds have begun negotiations to ally with Zero Wing. By the looks of it, they plan to sell level 45 top-tier equipment to the guild. I'm afraid this will affect our plans severely at this rate." According to previous reports, Zero Wing should have been on its last leg, yet due to Zero Wing City's teleportation function, Zero Wing had pulled itself out of its predicament. In fact, the teleportation service had become so profitable that Zero Wing was now able to continue its war of attrition against them. This was not good news. The long-term attrition war was a painful burden on Heaven's Burial's finances and development. They had already suffered significant casualties thanks to Zero Wing's bounty. This had impacted the guild members' leveling speed. Moreover, guild members had to stay alert for ambushes in the fields. Many players who had originally wanted to join Heaven's Burial had begun to change their mind. If they did not deal with Zero Wing quickly, their guild's development would stagnate, and they wouldn't be able to keep up with God's domain's other superpowers even with Ancient Rock City. Zero Wing is a tenacious cockroach. Singular Burial could not help but frown. Immediately he commanded, "Notify young Master Lei and tell him that it's time for his Thunder Legion to take action. Contact Blackwater as well. Tell them that if they still want a share of the orc mine, they should send more top-tier experts and help us finish off Zero Wing quickly." "We're taking action now?" Daybreak Fog was stunned. She hadn't expected Singular Burial to switch tactics so soon. Until now, their experts usually attacked in small groups, fleeing the moment they killed Zero Wing's members and minimizing their casualties. However, if they started team battles in the fields, they would suffer more casualties even if they dealt greater damage to their enemy. That was why they had avoided doing so thus far. Now that Singular Burial had approved team battles, he had proven that Zero Wing was a major threat to their guild. Thus, he decided to put a swift end to this war, regardless of cost, and exterminate the budding threat before it did permanent damage. "MHM. I want to see how long Zero Wing can hold on." Singular Burial nodded. Zero Wing's sudden transformation had exceeded his expectations and left him with no other choice, but he also wanted to use this opportunity to show Zero Wing how wide the gap was between their expert counts. Starmoon Kingdom, White River City, in a special forging room located on the Candlelight Trading Firm's top floor. Feng sat alone beside a furnace, repeatedly swinging a hammer as he forged the Conqueror's armor. To sharpen his focus, he had even used the precious soul water. The Conqueror's armor required a lot of materials, including over 10 main materials and over 20 support materials. Every material needed to be smelted carefully. Just the smelting and refining all of the involved materials took more than half an hour. If Feng had gone through the entire forging process alone, he would have only had time to forge a few pieces of the Conqueror's armor each day. Fortunately, he could rely on Candlelight's advanced forgers to help him with the smelting and refining processes, saving him plenty of time. Fortunately, with the improved Blacksteel Insignia, Feng's forging success rate had broken past the 30% threshold. Fusing, stacking, fusing, stacking. As he continued to fuse and shape the extracted materials, the Conqueror's armor began to take shape. Once the armor was perfect, Feng released a deep sigh of relief and began to draw the advanced magic array. Due to the soul water's effects, Feng was able to complete the advanced magic array naturally and without pause. The instant he completed the advanced magic array, the Conqueror's armor released a mesmerizing crimson glow. "This is the first Conqueror's armor I've forged and I've already triggered the strengthening effect?" Feng's excitement grew as he watched the crimson light, completely different from the usual glow on fine gold equipment. Chapter 1597, Improved Conqueror's Armor. Chapter 1597, Improved Conqueror's Armor. Despite being a master forger, Feng didn't have a particularly high success rate with forging the Conqueror's armor. Although God's domain had plenty of support tools, these tools would become less effective with more complex items. In fact, most support tools were nullified when producing an epic item. Only a small number of support tools could help a player craft an epic item. Feng hadn't expected, despite having barely over a 30% success rate, he would actually forge a successful Conqueror's armor on his first try. Moreover, he had triggered the Blacksteel Insignia's strengthening effect. After gazing at the armor for a moment, Feng clicked to inspect its attributes. Immediately, the system analyzed the Conqueror's armor statistics. System: Blacksteel Insignia's effect triggered. Attributes increased. System: Conqueror's armor has been forged successfully. Forging proficiency increased by 4 points. Obtained 3 million EXP. Conqueror's armor, chest piece, plate armor, fine gold rank. Level 50. Equipment requirement: Strength 730 and Agility 730. Defense plus 2,350. Strength plus 75, Endurance plus 84, Agility plus 72. Additional passive skill dash. Life sacrifice. The wearer will receive more power as their HP decreases to a maximum of 15% strength and 25% attack speed. Additional active skill dash. Basic strength battle array. Activation requires 5 or more players wearing the Conqueror's armor. Upon activation, wearer's strength increases by 25%, agility by 15%, endurance by 15% and physique by 10%. Grants basic perception sharing buff. Stamina and concentration consumption rates increase by 400%. Maintaining the battle array costs 1 magic crystal every 5 minutes. The Blacksteel Insignia is really quite amazing. Not only did it improve the armor's basic attributes, but it also boosted one of the armor's skills slightly. Although this Conqueror's armor still is not a match for level 50 dark equipment individually, it is not far from it. Feng was delighted as he read the Conqueror's armor's attributes. Level 50 was a major turning point in God's domain. Top-tier equipment past this level would become incredibly difficult to obtain. Even level 50, 100-man team dungeons only dropped level 50 fine gold equipment and set equipment at best. Generally, players could only obtain level 50 dark gold equipment from super large-scale team dungeons. On its own, the improved Conqueror's armor was only slightly less valuable than a piece of epic equipment of the same level, but if he had 5 pieces of the improved version of this armor, each piece would be worth as much as a piece of ordinary epic equipment. Unlike the improved Conqueror's armor, epic equipment only provided powerful boosts to basic attributes and a few powerful skills. On the other hand, the Conqueror's armor's basic strength battle array could improve players' combat standards as well as basic attributes and physique. The only flaw was the armor's level limit. At best, players could use the armor until level 60. Most epic equipment, in contrast, could be used past level 100. Gazing at the improved Conqueror's armor before him, Feng's passion to forge the armor ignited. If he could mass-produce the Conqueror's armor and equip a 1,000-man legion, the result would be mind-blowing. If he geared a legion of 1,000 expert players in the Conqueror's armor, he'd have a legion of refinement realm experts instantly. Such a legion would be unstoppable on the battlefield. He'd even dare to challenge a true super first-rate guild head-on with such a force, not to mention Heaven's Burial. Dreaming of such a powerful legion, Feng continued to forge one Conqueror's armor after another, not resting for a moment. Since Feng had nearly 100 advanced forgers to handle the most time-consuming process, smelting and refining, he could complete each forging attempt in roughly 10 minutes. As he became more familiar with the process, he was even able to work faster than that. Perhaps he had used all of his luck during the first attempt because unfortunately, the next 4 attempts all failed. In the blink of an eye, he had wasted over 200 gold in materials. If any other trading firm suffered such a loss, they'd likely halt production immediately, but Feng was unfazed. If equipment with basic battle arrays were that easy to produce, the various super guilds wouldn't have struggled so much in the past, mass-producing such equipment. However, as Feng continued his forging attempts, he became increasingly familiar with drawing the crucial advanced magic array. He'd even used divine providence to improve his success rate later. Although luck was insubstantial, it could, more or less, affect production success rate. Before Feng had realized it, he had already gone through 300 material sets. In the end, he had successfully forged 96 pieces of Conqueror's armor. His overall success rate was slightly higher than the theoretical success rate the system had given him, and among the 96 chest pieces, Feng had forged another 3 pieces of improved Conqueror's armor, securing a total of 4 improved chest pieces. Meanwhile, Feng's experience bar had risen steadily due to his diligent work to craft the Conqueror's armor. His leveling speed was 3 to 4 times faster than God's Domain's other peak experts. Although his leveling speed was impressive, there likely wasn't another player in God's Domain who would dare to replicate Feng's leveling method. The 300 material sets Feng had used were worth 15,000 gold in total, and this was only the current market value. Players would likely have to pay far more than that if they tried to purchase the materials in bulk. As Feng was about to use up the remaining 24 or so material sets, Aqua Rose contacted. Guild leader Heaven's Burial and Blackwater have suddenly increased the force they've mobilized against us. They've organized 100-man teams to ambush our dungeon raiding teams. Our casualty count is rising rapidly. We've already lost over 5,000 lives since they bolstered their forces. Although we've tried to retaliate, we're too outnumbered. We simply can't keep up with all of the attacks. Should I recall our guild members from the dungeon raids and grinding in the high-resource maps for now and concentrate on leveling up in a few safe maps? Due to Zero Wing City's rise in popularity, Aqua Rose was relatively confident that Zero Wing would survive the war with Heaven's Burial, but now Heaven's Burial and Blackwater had dispatched more experts to ambush their players in the various high-resource maps they occupied. The two guilds even targeted their 100-man elite and expert teams. This had never happened before. The wisest move right now would be to gather their members in a few specific leveling maps close to each other. Although this would limit their members' leveling speed, it would provide more security. Zero Wing could also send their limited number of experts as reinforcements far faster. They're finally done sitting by, huh? Feng frowned. He hadn't thought that Heaven's Burial would attempt to end this war so soon. Immediately he commanded, I like your suggestion. We need to concentrate our forces, but move them to the targeted high-resource maps instead. But the level 40 and 50 high-resource maps are too far apart. If a battle breaks out, our reinforcements will need some time to get there. Aqua Rose had also considered the idea, but it wasn't a wise move. Zero Wing had a limited number of experts, and they weren't enough to cover multiple maps that were so far apart. It's fine. Just do as I say. Leave the rest to me. Feng simply smiled, not bothering to offer any further explanation. Select 100 skilled plate armor classes from the Dark God's Legion and send them my way. They have to be level 50 or higher. 100 people. Aqua Rose could not figure out what Feng intended to do. Currently, only a few of Zero Wing's players were capable of standing against Heaven's Burial and Blackwater's experts. If they wanted to suppress the enemy's teams, they'd have to form a team of the guild's Tier 2 players. Even a 100-man expert team's ability to turn the tide of battle would be limited. But since Feng had given the command, she had no choice but to follow it. Chapter 1598, Exterminate Heaven's Burial. Chapter 1598, Exterminate Heaven's Burial. Starmoon Kingdom, Pyroxene Hills. As one of the many level 50 maps in Starmoon Kingdom, it housed plenty of ancient ruins, even if it weren't particularly resource-rich. Hence, many guilds and adventurer teams in the kingdom loved to explore the map and its ruins. The Pyroxene Hills was also home to some rare herbs and ores. Many independent players came to harvest these materials while grinding. Currently, two groups of players clashed outside one of the Pyroxene Hills' dilapidated ruins. All of the players were high-leveled, with the lowest at level 50, and the strongest players at level 52. One of the two groups wore Heaven's Burial's guild emblem, while the other players wore Zero Wings. Amazing. So, this is a team battle between guilds? The players passing by could not help but pause to watch the battle. They were captivated. Compared to the PvP battles between independent players they had seen before, this battle was on a level of its own. When independent teams clashed, the fight usually involved a dozen players or so, most of which focused on their own fights. It was more apt to call these battles free-for-alls rather than team battles. There was no coordination between any of the players. Normally, a single expert could change the course of the skirmish. However, battles between guild teams were a different story. These battles were akin to wars on ancient battlefields. Each team had clear leadership, and guild teams focused on coordination among team members, seeking the enemy's weak points to strike. In such battles, individual experts had very little effect on the outcome. For a time, Heaven's Burial and Zero Wings members fought. Spells and arrows flew across the battlefield as the healers in the back desperately cast one healing spell after another. However, as the battle drug on, Zero Wings' frontline melee players began to fall. Despite starting with the same number of players, Heaven's Burial clearly had the advantage due to its frightening number of experts. Generally, 5 or 6 expert players would lead a 100-man guild elite team. Yet, Heaven's Burial's elite team had more than 30 experts. In contrast, Zero Wings' team only had 15. Not only were expert players stronger than elites individually, but they also had better coordination, and they could easily find their opponent's weak points. As one player from Zero Wing fell after another, the battle became more one-sided. In the end, Zero Wings' team was forced to retreat. Unfortunately, Heaven's Burial's players clearly had no intention of letting their enemies get away as they chased after the fleeing players. Although Heaven's Burial suffered around 20 casualties, the team had annihilated the players from Zero Wing. Leader, Zero Wing's members are a bunch of weaklings. Had the guild leader given the command to attack earlier, Heaven's Burial would have long since dominated Starmoon Kingdom. That's right. Even if Zero Wing is powerful, it can only strut before first-rate guilds. It's nothing to Heaven's Burial. The players from Heaven's Burial laughed as they admired the weapons and equipment scattered across the ground. Zero Wing's time as Starmoon Kingdom's overlord was over, and Heaven's Burial wasn't the guild it had been in the past. Now, every aspect of the guild was formidable. In total, Heaven's Burial and Blackwater had dispatched over 8,000 experts and spread them across multiple teams to ambush Zero Wing's members. They had even dispatched top-tier and peak experts. With so many expert-led teams on the hunt, they would kill any Zero Wing member that dared to show up in the various leveling maps. Shortly after the team from Heaven's Burial left, another 20-man team from Zero Wing arrived on the battlefield. Damn it, we are too late again. Shadow Sword cursed as he surveyed the tattered battlefield. The leveling map he had been tasked to secure was simply too large, and Heaven's Burial had too many teams in the map. There was a limit to how many players he could save. Sometimes the enemy ambushed faraway teams, and by the time he arrived, the fight would be over. He couldn't help but feel powerless. Moreover, his leveling speed had sharply decreased since he had focused on hunting down Heaven's Burial's teams. Commander Shadow Sword, we just received a message from Vice Guild Leader Aqua. She wants all members who want to level to gather in these 4 high-resource maps. She's also ordered these specific Dark Gods Legion members to gather in White River City's guild residence immediately, a level 50 ranger reported as he handed Shadow Sword a list. Gather in these 4 maps? Is this a joke? Shadow Sword gaped at the 4 specified maps. While it would make defense and reinforcement easier if they gathered their guild members in a few select areas, the 4 maps were spread out. Sending their members to these maps was the equivalent of splitting the guild's power, making it easier for Heaven's Burial and Blackwater to slaughter them. The Vice Guild Leader has said that this is an order from our guild leader. The ranger nodded solemnly. An order from the guild leader? Hearing this, Shadow Sword was even more confused. I understand. We'll head to our assigned map right away. Any Dark Gods Legion members on the list should return to the guild residence immediately. While Shadow Sword's team prepared for the trip to another map, Zero Wings Guild members, who were scattered across Starmoon Kingdom, followed the same orders. Naturally, such a massive shift attracted the attention of the kingdom's various large guilds. What is Zero Wing trying to do? Daybreak Fog was baffled as she read the latest report a subordinate had sent her. Ah, truly foolish. Do they think this will scare us? Singular Burial chuckled at the report. Notify our generals and dispatch our forces to these 4 maps. Tell them to move in 100-man units or less. Do not start any large-scale fights with Zero Wing. I want to see how Black Flame intends to cope with so many teams. He had discovered Black Flame's capabilities long ago. Not only did the man wield large-scale destruction spells, but he also possessed a large-scale silencing skill. In battles involving thousands of players, these abilities worked wonders. Even if Heaven's Burial won due to its numeric advantage, the guild would suffer drastically, and that wasn't something he wished to see. Had Zero Wing gathered its members in a single map, he wouldn't have dared to send his guild members. Of course, he'd be more than happy to see Zero Wing do just that since only so many resources were available in a single map. If every Zero Wing member cowered in one area, even if it were a high-resource map, there wouldn't be enough resources to go around. Ultimately, it would damage the guild members' leveling speed. However, to ensure that its members could level normally, Zero Wing had split its players across 4 high-resource maps that were fairly far from each other. With Zero Wing's limited number of experts, it could only dispatch a few to protect each area. As long as Heaven's Burial continued to start small-scale battles, Zero Wing would fail to keep up with the enemy guild's numeric advantage. If this drug on, it would only be a matter of time before Zero Wing crumbled. Meanwhile, in Zero Wing's residence in White River City, 100 players wearing the core members' guild emblems sat in the residence's meeting room. The lowest level among the crowd was level 50, while the highest had reached level 52. All of these players could rank among the top regarding levels in any guild. As for their combat standards, the weakest among them had reached the middle stage of the Trial Tower's 6th floor, and the most powerful had reached the 7th floor. None of these players dared to utter a word as they watched the cloaked man before them, reverence and admiration filling their gazes. This cloaked man was none other than Black Flame, Zero Wing's guild leader and an expert of his own legends. Since everyone's here, let's get straight to business, Feng said as he glanced at the players in the room. Once he verified that there were enough players, he continued, "From now on, I have an extremely important task for you, but before carrying it out, you'll have to sign a confidentiality contract. If you don't wish to sign, you may leave and I'll find a replacement. If you have any questions, ask now." A confidentiality contract. Guild leader, can you tell us what kind of task we'll be doing? Everyone stirred for a moment when they heard Feng mention a confidentiality contract. They were all profoundly curious about what Feng had in store for them, and not a single player among the crowd showed any signs of abstaining from the challenge. "I'm sure you are all aware that Heaven's Burial has caused our guild quite a bit of trouble lately. The task I have for you is very simple. You'll annihilate Heaven's Burial." Chapter 1599. Count your deaths on me. Chapter 1599. Count your deaths on me. When Feng finished speaking, silence descended on the meeting room. Heaven's Burial shone like the midday sun in several kingdoms and empires neighboring the Orc Empire. Not only had it annexed many workshops and adventurer teams, but it had also captured ancient Rock City. Now, the guild had nearly as much overall strength as a super first-rate guild. Although Zero Wing was also powerful and had great growth potential, it wasn't as powerful as Heaven's Burial, which had both its own strength and the support of major corporations. In fact, as members of Zero Wing, they had prepared themselves for a long, arduous battle against their rival guild. Yet, Feng wanted them to exterminate Heaven's Burial. He had also made the declaration as if it were a matter of course. For a moment they wondered if Feng had gone mad. However, they couldn't help but burn with fighting spirit, knowing that Feng had chosen them for this task. Those bastards from Heaven's Burial have always been an eyesore. Guild leader, just tell us what we need to do. We finally get to start a real fight with Heaven's Burial? I've been waiting to duke it out with Heaven's Burial for a long time. Those cowards only know how to hit and run. If given the chance, I'll beat them until not even their mothers recognize them. Everyone's blood boiled with excitement as they looked at Feng. Their hatred for Heaven's Burial was nothing new. In fact, that hatred had only increased due to the guild's shameless tactics. Alright, since none of you have any issues, sign these confidentiality contracts. Feng nodded in satisfaction before handing out a contract. When players signed confidentiality contracts, they wouldn't be able to discuss the relevant information while logged into God's domain. Although the main God system could not regulate information in the real world, if one found evidence of someone violating their contract in the real world, they could hand the evidence over to the main God system. If the evidence were valid, the player would receive their deserved punishment, the severity of which would depend on the terms of the contract. Feng wanted to keep the Conqueror's armor's battle array a secret. Although God's domain's various powers and players were bound to discover battle arrays eventually, he wanted to reserve the armor as one of the guild's trump cards. The later the various major powers discovered battle arrays, the better. The penalty Feng had set for breaking the confidentiality contract wasn't unusual. Any player who violated it would have their account permanently suspended. In general, Guilds chose a consequence that would bar players from God's domain permanently if they violated a confidentiality contract regarding extremely important secrets. It would not even matter if players deleted their accounts, they'd never be able to log back in. Hence, Guild's core secrets hadn't often leaked in the past. The consequences of doing so would be devastating to players who had grown comfortable with God's domain's lifestyle. Permanently losing access to the game was more of a punishment than death itself. This was especially true for players who earned access to their guild's core secrets. Of course, there were bound to be players who would take the risk when offered an astronomical price. Once the 100 plate armor players from the Dark God's Legion signed the contracts, Feng pulled one Conqueror's armor after another from his bag. While Aqua Rose had gathered the necessary players, Feng had successfully forged another 4 pieces of the Conqueror's armor. Among these 4 pieces, one was even an improved Conqueror's armor. This increased the count to 5 improved pieces, just enough for a 5-man party to activate the basic strength battle array. What? There's so much level 50 fine gold equipment here. Wait, look at the attributes. They're insane. This basic strength battle array is amazing. It's basically a mini berserk skill. Moreover, it doesn't have a cooldown and only costs 1 magic crystal per 5 minutes. It can last until players run out of stamina. Everyone was flabbergasted over the 100 chest pieces Feng had revealed. They frequently grinded in level 50 plus maps, so they knew just how difficult it was to obtain level 50 equipment. Even mysterious iron equipment was incredibly rare, let alone secret silver rank. Level 50 mysterious iron equipment's basic attributes could easily rival those of level 45 fine gold equipment, and level 50 equipment provided higher defense than lower level equipment. However, the superior defense wasn't displayed in numerical value. Rather, it came in the form of impact mitigation. When players were attacked in God's domain, the impact oftentimes disrupted their stance, revealing flaws in their defense. Aside from damage reduction, a player's defense could also mitigate some, if not all, of the impact from an attack. Thus, when deciding between level 45 fine gold equipment and level 50 mysterious iron equipment, players usually chose the latter, even if the former had stronger skills. Needless to say, not even level 45 top-tier dark gold equipment could compare to level 50 fine gold equipment. Unfortunately, such equipment was extremely challenging to obtain. Even when raiding level 50 100-man hell mode team dungeons, the armor only had a chance of dropping. It wasn't guaranteed. Yet, Feng had just set 100 pieces of such equipment before them. Moreover, the Conqueror's armor had a superb skill for large-scale combat. Every one of these players from the Dark God's Legion felt as if they were dreaming. Only a few of them had level 50 dark gold equipment, while most of them still used level 45 dark gold equipment or a combination of level 50 mysterious iron and secret silver equipment. Even in a first-rate guild, their equipment would only be second to those who wore epic equipment. In response to these players' elation, Feng simply chuckled and shook his head. All of these players only had eyes for the Conqueror's armor's basic attributes. They had no idea that the fine gold-ranked Conqueror's armor was even more valuable than level 60 dark gold equipment. I want each of you to select one of the chest pieces. Then I'll split you into 20 parties of 5. Each party will take a healer and head to the 4 high-resource maps where we've sent our guild members to grind. I need all of you to continue the search for Heaven's Burial and Blackwater's members. If you find a group of 100 or fewer, kill them all. If the enemy overwhelms your team with numbers or peak experts are among their teams, notify the commanders responsible for the region, then send you reinforcements. If that is the case, you just need to keep an eye on the enemy. If they chase after you, try to kite them and regroup with the reinforcements. Feng strictly explained the details of their task as he eyes the players before him. By having the Dark God's Legion members move in 6-man parties, they could move swiftly and stealthily. Although splitting these Dark God's Legion members into 6-man parties, rather than 100-man teams, would limit the Legion's combat power, the smaller parties would seem like less of a threat to their enemies. This would make it easier for the Dark God's Legion members to evade the enemy's detection. When Feng fell silent, everyone in the meeting room was dumbfounded. They even wondered if they had heard wrong. Feng actually wanted them to form 6-man parties to take on Heaven's Burial's 100-man teams. If they targeted ordinary 100-man teams, they'd be confident of their victory, but Heaven's Burial's teams were anything but ordinary. Each team was normally led by dozens of experts. If they assaulted such a force, they'd be attempting suicide, not starting a battle. Relax. I'll take responsibility for any of your deaths. Feng could see these players' confusion regarding his decision. However, he simply chuckled and said, "Or don't you have the courage for a task like this?" So what if these 100-man teams are from Heaven's Burial? Guild leader, just you wait. Even if we don't kill them all, we'll definitely make them suffer. Initially, worry had gripped everyone's hearts, but after Feng had told them off in such a way, their fighting spirit began to burn anew. As Feng had implied, if they weren't even brave enough to do this, they might as well stop calling themselves experts. Good. Also, the 3 parties with the highest kill counts will receive a large number of GCPs and gain 1 opportunity to learn an advanced combat technique. Whether or not you earn the opportunity will depend on your effort, Feng said, nodding in approval at everyone's high spirits. Immediately, he organized his players into parties before sending them off to the 4 high-resource maps. When they had heard that they might be able to learn an advanced combat technique, these players couldn't help their growing excitement. Advanced combat techniques were the guild's core secrets. It was extremely difficult to earn the opportunity to learn one. Normally, they'd only have the chance to earn the opportunity if they achieved some impressive feat or were selected by the guild for training, yet all they needed to do was rank among the top 3 for kill counts. Why wouldn't they be excited? After Feng finished with the Conqueror's armor and the 20 teams, he made his way towards Ciliora's smithy in White River City to repair the Disintegration armor. Chapter 1600, Legendary Armor's Power. Chapter 1600, Legendary Armor's Power. The Disintegration armor's existence was giving Feng a huge headache right now. As he was no longer at the World Summit, the Disintegration armor's disintegration power was not being suppressed anymore. Meanwhile, with the dispelling of a portion of the evil power, the disintegration power leaking from the Disintegration armor had intensified. As a result, the Disintegration power, which initially suppressed his basic attributes by only 50%, now suppressed them by 60%. He didn't dare to recklessly remove the evil power suppressing the Disintegration armor any further. After all, if he removed the evil power entirely, the suppression on him might become even stronger. If that happened, he would definitely be doomed. Hence, as a precaution, he decided to meet with Ciliora first before doing anything else to the Disintegration armor. Upon arriving at Ciliora's smithy, things were just as usual. There were no guests before the cozy wooden house. Only the clangor of hammering came from it. There was nothing unusual about this place whatsoever. However, when Feng stepped into the smithy, it was as if he had entered an entirely different world. The mana density inside the smithy was far superior to even that of Zero Wing City. Meanwhile, at this moment, Ciliora stood before a furnace smelting materials. Upon seeing Ciliora's actions, Feng had to admit that a Grandmaster Forger was indeed different from a Master Forger. Master Forgers would normally use only flames when smelting and refining materials. However, Ciliora was actually controlling a 3-fold magic array to imbue an oceanic amount of mana into her materials first before refining them using flames, which boosted the quality of her materials. Meanwhile, upon sensing Feng's entry into the smithy, Ciliora sent him a glance. Although Ciliora herself was not a combat-specialized NPC, Feng still felt as if Ciliora saw through his soul when she looked at him. It seems you managed to find some god's power to remove that evil power while you were gone. It's a pity that the god's power you acquired was too little to completely remove that evil power, Ciliora said, shaking her head as she looked at Feng. She then demanded, "Well, out with it. What are you here for? If you're looking for a method to suppress that disintegration power of yours, I don't have any solutions. Right now, the only thing you can do is gather enough god's power and remove that evil power as soon as possible. Otherwise, the disintegration armor will only lure even more orcs to you. Soon, it won't even matter if you're hiding inside a city, as those orcs would do anything to satisfy their greed for the disintegration power. If things drag on for too long, even NPC cities won't be able to stop the orcs?" Feng could not help but be shocked when he heard Ciliora's words. He had never thought that removing a portion of the evil power suppressing the disintegration armor would have such frightening effects. If what Ciliora said was true, then he really wouldn't have any place he could hide in the future. "Lady Ciliora, do you mean that if I manage to gather sufficient god's power, I'll be able to break free of my current predicament?" Feng asked curiously. Previously, The reason why he chose to deal with the problem regarding the disintegration armor quickly was the armor serving as a beacon that lured mutated orcs to him. This situation prevented him from taking action out in the fields freely. If he could not deal with this problem, he wouldn't be able to do anything at all in the future. That should be the case. After all, the only reason the disintegration armor is leaking disintegration power is the loss of its channeling abilities. If the materials making up the disintegration armor recover, they should be able to control this disintegration power, Celiora said, a hint of uncertainty in her tone. Upon hearing Celiora's explanation, Feng breathed out a sigh of relief. He then took out the disintegration armor and had it absorb the god crystals inside his bag. The advanced god crystal and the basic god crystal there shattered and transformed into streams of golden mist that flowed into the disintegration armor. When the golden mist suffused the disintegration armor, streams of pitch-black energy started flowing out of the armor. When Celiora saw this pitch-black energy corroding its surroundings, she could not help but be surprised and hurriedly activated the magic array set up inside her house. The magic array immediately started suppressing the pitch-black energy, nullifying its corrosive capabilities. Although the pitch-black energy's corrosive capabilities were suppressed, the energy itself showed no signs of disappearing. Instead, it actually started condensing. After 5 seconds passed, the mist-like energy transformed into a pitch-black energy bead that hovered quietly in midair, releasing a terrifying aura. What is this thing? Feng was indescribably shocked as he looked at the pitch-black energy bead before him. The aura the bead radiated made him feel as if a gigantic beast had just opened its bloody maw before him. At this moment, he could not even move his body in the slightest and could only look helplessly at the energy bead. Aside from the pitch-black energy bead, a change had also occurred to the disintegration armor, which he had placed on the table. As if the armor itself had gained life, Feng could clearly feel a surge of vitality from it. Rather than an inanimate object, the disintegration armor before him felt like it was some kind of life form instead. As the evil power no longer tainted the disintegration armor, the magic circuits covering the surface of the armor released a dazzling glow. Aside from the house becoming brightly lit, the mana inside the house had also frozen. Feng could not sense the slightest flow of mana whatsoever right now. However, this situation persisted for only a few short seconds, after which the entire house returned to its normal state. As for the disintegration armor, it was as if the armor had just received a complete makeover. Both the armor's external appearance and aura had changed significantly. Despite the armor merely sitting atop the stone table, it radiated a power that made even Feng's soul shudder in fear. In fact, the stone table the disintegration armor sat on had even started disintegrating, unable to withstand the armor's power. So, this is the disintegration armor's original power? Feng was at a loss for words as he looked at the stone table decomposing at a speed visible to the naked eye. It should be known that Celiora was a bona fide grandmaster forger. Although the furniture placed inside her house appeared normal, in reality that was far from the case. In fact, even the stone table before him had an extraordinary origin. From what Feng could tell, the table should be made of fire essence stone. Not only was fire essence stone incomparably tough, but it was also one of the top-tier magic resistance materials in God's domain. Yet, now, it actually couldn't withstand the disintegration armor's power despite the armor being in a passive state right now. This was simply inconceivable. However, before the stone table could fully disintegrate, Celiora quickly made her move, line after line of divine runes appearing before her. A moment later, a fourfold magic array formed around the disintegration armor. With the appearance of the magic array, the stone table stopped disintegrating. However, the magic array continuously produced crackling sounds, a sign that it couldn't withstand the disintegration armor's power either. Amazing. Truly amazing. Even a fourfold void magic array isn't able to contain this thing. As expected of a mythical artifact created by the great Orc Emperor. Celiora's eyes glowed as she looked at her crumbling magic array. At this moment, it was as if her eyes had just been opened to a whole new world. Meanwhile, Feng was quite shocked as he looked at the disintegrating fourfold magic array. A fourfold magic array. That was a magic array that even mythic monsters could not destroy. Yet, a piece of equipment in its passive state was destroying such a magic array. It was no wonder the disintegration set was considered as one of the 9 great legendary sets in God's domain. Despite the disintegration armor being damaged, it still possessed such frightening capabilities. One could just imagine how powerful the founding emperor of the Orc Empire was when he wore the complete disintegration set. Based on this, the legends of the founding emperor fighting against gods were not exaggerations at all. I don't have the ability to suppress the power this disintegration armor is releasing. Do you wish to take this armor away or let me recast it for you right now? Celiora asked, smiling as she looked at Feng. Take it away? Feng smiled bitterly. If Celiora couldn't suppress the disintegration armor's power, he would be a fool if he thought even for a second that he could. He immediately replied, I'll have to trouble Lady Celiora then. Chapter 1601, Recasting the Disintegration Armor. Chapter 1601, Recasting the Disintegration Armor. With Feng's permission, Celiora looked at the disintegration armor before her and smiled. She then stretched out her hand and grabbed the armor directly. The disintegration armor's frightening disintegration power could destroy even a table made out of fire essence stone. Yet now the armor had no effect on Celiora's gloved hand whatsoever. Amazing. Sure enough, a Grandmaster Forger really is an extraordinary existence. Feng was indescribably shocked as he looked at the leather gloves Celiora wore. The fact that the gloves remained unaffected by the disintegration power the disintegration armor radiated could only mean that the pair of gloves was legendary equipment. In God's domain, legendary items were likewise items that NPCs could obtain only by chance. Even among Tier 4 NPCs, very few of them would have a legendary item. Meanwhile, those who did were no doubt powerful individuals in kingdoms and empires. Moreover, Celiora did not have just one legendary item. When the disintegration power tried spreading to Celiora's body, a layer of invisible power blocked it abruptly. Meanwhile, the only possibility Feng could think of to explain such a phenomenon was that the leather armor Celiora wore was also legendary rank. 2 legendary items. In the past, even players who obtained only one legendary item could challenge opponents of a higher tier. Meanwhile, players that managed to acquire 2 legendary items had been as rare as a phoenix's feather in God's domain, and every one of them was a Tier 6 God-ranked player. Just as Feng was admiring the legendary items on Celiora, the latter picked up the disintegration armor and placed it in the heart of the magic array protecting the smithy. She then began drawing runes and chanting an incantation. Following which, line after line of divine runes flew rapidly to surround the disintegration armor. After just a short moment, hundreds of lines of divine runes encircled the disintegration armor. These runes then transformed into magic arrays. In the blink of an eye, a 5-fold magic array formed around the disintegration armor. The frightening pressure that the 5-fold magic array radiated made even Feng extremely uncomfortable. When the 5-fold magic array's formation was complete, the magic array thoroughly suppressed the disintegration power the disintegration armor was leaking. Seeing this, Celiora took out a crystal which glowed with a golden hue, and inserted it into the 5-fold magic array. Boom. The moment the golden crystal came into contact with the magic array, the entire magic array ignited with dazzling golden flames. Unlike ordinary flames, these golden flames gave off a sacred and gentle feeling. Meanwhile, the disintegration armor trapped inside the magic array started transforming. The incomparably tough materials making up the armor turned bright red and even showed signs of melting. What? This is sacred fire. Feng could not help but gape in shock when he saw the golden flames. Sacred fire was something he had only seen depicted in the ancient texts of God's domain. This kind of flame was known as a refining treasure. However, sacred fire did not exist naturally in the continent of God's domain. It only occurred in certain special spaces. Aside from ancient gods, nobody else could truly control it. Meanwhile, the sacred fires that could be found in God's domain were all sealed in special crystals left behind by the ancient gods and could be used only once. Even so, sacred fire was still a flame countless forgers dreamed of obtaining. It was fervently sought after because this flame was the best flame for forging legendary items. In Feng's previous life, a crystal-encased sacred fire had appeared in the Blackwing auction house. Back then, many wealthy players and NPCs had contested over the item. In the end, though, the Super Guild Battle Wolves had purchased it for an astronomical price of 310,000 gold, shocking the entire God's domain. Back then, many superpowers had ridiculed the Battle Wolves for being foolish. After all, the Super Guild had spent 310,000 gold for a one-time use item, which was a massive expenditure even for a super guild. However, in the end, one had to admit that it had been money well spent. Using the Sacred Fire, the Grandmaster Forger working for the Battle Wolves had created a legendary item. Although its performance was below average, it was still a legendary item at the very least. Fragmented legendary items could not compare to it. This outcome had also further whetted the various superpowers' desire for Sacred Fire. Feng had never imagined that Celiora had actually managed to get her hands on a Sacred Fire. Moreover, she even used it on the Disintegration armor without asking for payment. If he was required to cover the cost, even if he sold himself now, he wouldn't be able to gather enough money. While Feng was lost in his thoughts, the Disintegration armor inside the five-fold magic array had turned white-hot. Meanwhile, Celiora started writing another series of divine runes and merging them into the Disintegration armor. Despite Feng having a certain level of understanding of divine runes, his mind was a complete blank when he looked at the divine runes Celiora wrote. 5 minutes later, the white-hot Disintegration armor was covered entirely in golden runes. At this moment, Celiora stopped writing divine runes and breathed out a sigh of relief. Although her face was visibly tired, her eyes glowed with excitement. Good. Now is the time. Use your blood to establish a contract. Celiora suddenly shouted to Feng. As soon as Celiora said these words, a system notification entered his ears. System. Do you wish to establish a blood contract and permanently contribute 200 points of every basic attribute to the Disintegration armor? 200 points of every basic attribute? Feng could not help being shocked as he looked at the system notification. Permanently losing 200 points in every basic attribute was equivalent to losing 1,000 attribute points. Losing so many attribute points was no laughing matter. If an ordinary expert were placed in such a situation, their accounts would be crippled instantly. Even Feng would have great difficulty making up for such a loss. Feng had never expected the price of the Disintegration armor to be so huge. System. You have 5 seconds remaining to make a decision. If you refuse, you will not have another chance in the future. Alright, I agree. Feng declared while clicking agree. Just like the system had stated, this was an opportunity for him. If he rejected it, who knew when he would gain another chance to obtain a legendary item in the future. Moreover, the Disintegration armor was top-notch even among legendary items. In comparison, 1,000 attribute points was indeed an insignificant price to pay. Only, some of the advantages he had accumulated thus far would disappear as a result of this decision. After Feng clicked agree, a blood-red magic array appeared before him. He then placed both his hands on the magic array without hesitation. He felt power leaving his body right away. At the same time, blood-red magic circuits appeared on the surface of the Disintegration armor. Once these magic circuits covered the entire Disintegration armor, the armor released a pulse, as if it had just gained life. This pulse of power instantly shattered the five-fold magic array. In the next moment, Feng felt an even more frightening aura coming from the Disintegration armor. However, unlike before, the aura the Disintegration armor exuded this time did not affect Feng whatsoever. On the contrary, he felt a sense of intimacy in this aura, as if the Disintegration armor was an extension of himself. Meanwhile, as the Disintegration armor's aura calmed down, another system notification entered Feng's ears. System, congratulations. You have completed the Recast the Disintegration armor quest. Rewarding 20 legacy skill points, 100,000 free skill proficiency points, 100 free mastery points, 50 humanity reputation points, 2 level increases, and the Disintegration user title. Chapter 1602, Legendary Reward. Chapter 1602, Legendary Reward. When the system notification ended, Feng's experience bar started increasing rapidly. In the blink of an eye, he went from level 61 to level 63. Meanwhile, his legacy skill point count, which had stagnated for a long time now, also increased by 20 points. What a bountiful reward. Feng could not help getting a little excited as he looked at the quest reward. Normally, aside from completing special quests, players would receive only 1 legacy skill point for every 3 level-ups. To put it simply, legacy skill points were extremely rare. Yet now he had obtained 20 points from a single quest, enough for him to exchange for 1 or 2 tier 2 legacy skills. In God's domain, skill books for the Tier 2 standard and higher were extremely rare. Normally, players could obtain skills and spells at Tier 2 and above only by using legacy skill points. Hence, even after reaching Tier 2, players would not have a lot of Tier 2 skills. They would mostly use Tier 1 skills for combat and keep Tier 2 skills as trump cards. In other words, gaining an additional Tier 2 skill was equivalent to gaining another trump card. Moreover, aside from legacy skill points, the quest had also awarded him with 100,000 free skill proficiency points, which would allow him to fast-track leveling up his skills. Needless to say, as a skill's level increased, its overall performance would improve as well. This, in turn, would enhance his combat power. Following which, Feng spent all of his legacy skill points to learn Purgatory Pentaslash, a Tier 2 legacy skill with maximum explosive power. Purgatory Pentaslash Action Type. Requires Sword. Tier 2 Level 1. Proficiency 0/30,000. Instantly execute 5 slashes, with each slash being stronger than the former. Each subsequent slash gains an additional 20% strength and 10% attack speed. Cooldown 20 seconds. After learning the skill, Feng immediately invested 30,000 proficiency points to upgrade Purgatory Pentaslash to Tier 2 Level 2. Now, each subsequent attack gained an additional 21% strength and 11% attack speed. Although the improvement was small, to a Tier 2 player, an addition of 1% strength could mean an increase of 10 strength. Not to mention, this addition would be repeated 4 times in total. As for the remaining 70,000 proficiency points, Feng used them to upgrade the Tier 1 Chop. Chop was a skill that swordsman players could learn at Tier 0. The skill could be upgraded only to the Tier 1 standard at maximum. However, it was a skill that players would frequently use in battle, as it had a very short cooldown. At the same time, the skill also dealt a relatively significant amount of damage. Hence, as long as swordsman players upgraded their chop skill, their overall DPS would improve as well. After Feng invested his remaining 70,000 proficiency points, his chop skill leveled up twice, instantly going from Tier 1 Level 3 to Tier 1 Level 5. Chop Action Type. Requires Sword. Tier 1 Level 5, Proficiency 12, 612/30,000. Additional 1,600 base damage. Deals up to 3 consecutive hits in 1 second. If attacks land in the same location, damage is increased by 60%. Attack range, 7 yards. Cooldown, 3 seconds. Compared to when the skill was at Tier 1 Level 1, after it reached Tier 1 Level 5, not only did the additional base damage it dealt increase by 1,000 points, but the bonus damage multiplier provided, if all 3 attacks landed on the same spot, had also risen from 50% to 60%. There was a significant improvement in damage. Most importantly, the attack range had also extended from 6 yards to 7 yards, which made it even more difficult for enemies to dodge the skill. Feng felt very satisfied with this outcome. In the past, Level 60+ swordsmen normally managed to level up their chop only to Tier 1, Level 2 or Level 3. Very few had been able to level up the skill to Tier 1, Level 4, much less Level 5. After distributing his free skill proficiency points, Feng set his eyes on the Disintegration User title. Disintegration User, Advanced Title. The proof of ownership for the Disintegration power. Endow Disintegration power to a maximum of 30 players within a 200-yard radius, increasing their basic attributes by 10% and damage by 20%. The magic damage and physical damage they receive will also be decreased by 30% and 15%, respectively. Reading the introduction for the Disintegration User title stunned Feng. Titles were different from domain skills. In the case of domain skills, the simultaneous use of multiple domain skills would weaken their effects slightly. There might even be a counter-reaction. However, it was a different story for titles. The effects of titles could be stacked with the effects of domain skills without them interfering with one another. Although he could only endow Disintegration power to a maximum of 30 players, it was still plenty amazing. The Disintegration User title would work wonders in team battles and dungeon raids. Meanwhile, although the Disintegration User title's effects were wonderful, Feng had noticed an even more exciting matter. And that was the increase to his basic attributes. Due to the improvement of his life rating, each time he leveled up, he would gain more basic attributes than he did before. After leveling up twice in a row, not only had he acquired a large number of free attribute points, but his basic attributes had also received a significant boost. Overall, he now gained 20 more attribute points each time he leveled up. So, this is the power of the Dark Iron Bloodline? Feng was at a loss for words as he looked at his improved basic attributes. Currently he was still only a level 63 Tier 2 player, yet the Dark Iron Bloodline was already providing him with an additional 20 attribute points with each level up. Moreover, this number would increase as he reached higher levels and tiers. He might even be able to recover the 1000 attribute points he lost today before he got to level 100. Just as Feng was feeling shocked by the power of his bloodline, Celiora turned her gaze to him. "You're very lucky. The recasting this time was extremely successful. However, as you are too weak right now, despite having established a blood contract with the Disintegration armor, you still cannot fully control the Disintegration armor. Right now, all the blood contract is doing is preventing you from being affected by the armor's power. If you wish to fully control the armor, you'll need to become stronger," Celiora said as she turned her gaze back to the Disintegration armor, which was still sitting in the center of her smithy's magic array. "However, you don't need to feel dejected. Although you cannot use the Disintegration armor now, since you've already established a blood contract with it, you can utilize a small portion of its power." Although she had managed to recast the Disintegration armor, at the end of the day she was not the armor's creator. She only managed to shoddily re-establish the armor's magic circuits using her limited knowledge of divine runes. The divine runes she drew simply could not compare with those of the Disintegration armor's creator. The final magic circuit she ended up forming still had many problems. The flow of energy in the armor also wasn't perfect. Without a considerable amount of power, one would not be able to control the armor at all. Upon hearing Celiora's words, Feng could not help but take a look at the Disintegration armor's attributes. Indeed, just like Celiora had said, the Disintegration armor was still considerably unstable after being recast. It needed him to reach Tier 3 before he could equip it. Aside from that, there was no other information stated in the armor's attribute panel. However, the Disintegration field skill granted to him had strengthened considerably. Disintegration field disintegrates all skills and spells within a 100-yard radius. Skills and spells at Tier 2 and below will be nullified, while skills and spells above Tier 2 will be weakened by 60%. All entities within range of the Disintegration field will sustain a 40% reduction to basic attributes, physique, and stamina in addition to a 400% increase to their stamina and concentration consumption rates. No cooldown. This is the real Disintegration field? After looking at the new Disintegration field, Feng finally understood why legendary items could allow players to challenge opponents of higher tiers. Currently he could use only a small portion of the Disintegration armor's power, yet the armor was already providing him with such great benefits. If he could equip the armor now, he would simply be invincible among the current players of God's domain. However, Feng only toyed with this thought. Legendary equipment was not that easy to equip, all the more top-notch legendary equipment like the Disintegration armor. He should just be grateful that the Disintegration armor no longer suppressed him and provided a stronger Disintegration field. After storing the Disintegration armor, Feng finally shifted his sights to the pitch-black energy bead floating in midair. Although the energy bead's aura had already disappeared, the energy bead had also formed a zone completely void of mana around itself. Just by entering this void zone, Feng felt his entire body becoming incomparably heavy. At the same time, his mind also became sluggish like never before. Chapter 1603, Destruction Crystal. Chapter 1603, Destruction Crystal. What is this thing? The closer Feng got to the hovering energy bead, the heavier his body felt. He even felt somewhat dizzy, his mind growing fuzzy. He felt as if his control over his own body had dulled, as if it no longer belonged to him. This was the first time he had ever experienced such a sensation in God's domain, both in this life and the previous one. If players merely lost some attributes, they'd at most feel physically powerless, but their mind wouldn't be affected. Yet, despite his unchanged basic attributes, his overall combat power had decreased by at least 80%. At this point, even an ordinary Tier 2 player could easily kill him. It's best if you don't get too close to this thing. When Feng was less than a yard from the energy bead, Celiora raised her hand to stop him. Hearing Celiora's warning, Feng obediently retreated from the energy bead. He only regained control of his body after he had left the void zone. He couldn't help but stare at the energy bead in shock. It was too strong. If he could wield this power, using it on the battlefield against other players, he'd become truly invincible. While the energy bead didn't suppress basic attributes, it significantly reduced players' control of their bodies, and regardless of how high a player's attributes were, they'd become a helpless child when subjected to the energy bead's mental suppression. This isn't something you can withstand at your current power. If you try to touch it, you'll lose your life on the spot. Even if you are a heaven-blessed individual, it'll still be some time before you can resurrect, Celiora explained when she noticed Feng's dumbfounded expression. Death upon touch? And the resurrection time is so long? Feng couldn't help his growing curiosity over the bead's identity. Lady Celiora, what is this item? He had heard of many items that could kill players upon contact, but he had never heard of items increasing players' resurrection time. As far as he knew, only certain skills and high-tiered NPCs could do such a thing. The ability to absorb a player's soul was one such example. Yet, even after using omniscient eyes on the energy bead, the bead's inscription still said, unknown. He couldn't even get a name. This is a destruction crystal, formed from the power of destruction. Not only can it destroy physical material, but it can also destroy souls. If even a strand of this power of destruction taints an immortal soul, it will need a long time to recover, Celiora explained as she watched the hovering black bead. Although the destruction crystal is currently inactive, even the weak energy it's radiating is dangerous to you. After her explanation, Celiora began to chant an incantation, writing several lines of divine runes in the air as she did so. In seconds, the divine runes encased the destruction crystal. With a wave of her hand, Celiora sent the hovering crystal to Feng. You can consider this destruction crystal as an unexpected reward. Use it during a crucial moment to save your life, but be careful when you do. If not handled properly, you might sacrifice your own life during the process, Celiora gravely warned Feng. Alright, you can leave now. I've gained a significant boon from recasting the disintegration armor, so I need to rest and process the information. Since I don't wish to be disturbed, I'll be leaving White River City for some time. Feng stored the destruction crystal and nodded to Celiora before taking his leave. Although it seemed as if Celiora hadn't done much, as a master forger, Feng was familiar with the delicacy of re-establishing the disintegration armor's magic circuits. The process would even exhaust a grandmaster forger like Celiora. After leaving Celiora's smithy, Feng could no longer bottle his curiosity as he inspected the destruction crystal in his bag. Destruction crystal, consumable. Sealed by Celiora. When unsealed, unleashes the power of destruction in a 1,000-yard radius. A 1,000-yard AoE? Feng's jaw dropped when he read the introduction text. The destruction crystal's AoE was even stronger than Tier 4 large-scale destruction spells, but unlike these spells, which could be cast from a distance, the disintegration crystal would explode the moment the seal was lifted. Even if a player threw the thing when they activated it, they'd be lucky to get it 100 yards away and would still get caught in the AoE. Meanwhile, the power of destruction would damage both the physical body and the soul. If this power killed a player, the consequences would be even more severe than if their immortal soul were absorbed. It was no wonder why Celiora warned him to take care when using the destruction crystal. I mustn't use this unless it's absolutely necessary. When Feng recalled the feeling of standing too close to the power of destruction, his heart skipped a beat. However, now that he had dealt with the disintegration armor, his basic attributes were free of its suppression. Moreover, he no longer had to worry about mutated orcs targeting him out in the fields. He could now execute his plans without worry. As Feng prepared to visit Zero Wing City to check on its situation, his system communicator rang. Phoenix Rain. Feng could not help his curiosity when he saw the caller ID. Phoenix Rain had been very busy lately. After gaining control of a portion of Thunder Island, she had quickly taken advantage of the opportunity to grow her faction's strength. In addition, she still had to keep an eye on Nine Dragons' Emperor. She should be busy as hell without a minute to spare, yet she was contacting him. Naturally, Feng picked up the call. Yifeng, I've just received some important information. You should be very careful of Heaven's Burial, Phoenix Rain said somberly. Since Nine Dragons' Emperor gained nothing on Thunder Island due to our partnership, he's secretly colluded with Beast Emperor. From what my subordinates discovered, Nine Dragons' Emperor has only made one demand of Beast Emperor: Zero Wing's destruction. Furthermore, Beast Emperor has deep ties with Heaven's Burial. Now that your two guilds are at war, Beast Emperor won't miss this opportunity. Beast Emperor? Feng frowned. Previously, due to his focus on the war with Heaven's Burial, he had temporarily set aside the issue of Beast Emperor and the Black Dragon Empire's Evil God's Temple. If Beast Emperor really got involved in this guild war, Zero Wing would be at a disadvantage. Yet Feng didn't know the Evil God's Temple's exact whereabouts in the Black Dragon Empire and Star Moon Kingdom. Beast Emperor also moved like a ghost, and right now Feng had no way of dealing with the man. You should also be careful of Heaven's Burial's Lei Jingyang. Although Lei Jingyang only leads a workshop, the Thunder Legion under his command has quite a few refinement realm experts. Moreover, the Thunder Legion's members are extremely adept in field combat. When Crimson Emperor tried to contest Lei Jingyang's group over an ancient ruin, the guild actually lost. Even Cuttlefish, the commander of Crimson Emperor's trump card legion, died. It's best if you avoid small-scale field battle with Lei Jingyang's people, Phoenix Rain warned. Even Cuttlefish lost? Feng was surprised. Crimson Emperor was a super first-rate guild and in no way weaker than the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion. Naturally, Cuttlefish, who commanded the guild's trump card legion, was a powerful individual. Although he was not a domain realm expert, he had a wealth of combat experience. He was also the Guardian Knight and ranked 77th on the God's Domain Experts list, earning the nickname Iron Wall. In a one-on-one fight, even domain realm experts would struggle to kill him. Furthermore, Cuttlefish was constantly surrounded by his own experts. Feng found it hard to believe that Lei Jingyang had actually killed the man. In any case, just be careful, Phoenix Rain reiterated. If you lack manpower, I'll send Blue and a group of experts to help. I'm sure that Heaven's Burial will hold back from doing anything drastic with the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's members around. Thank you for the offer, but we'll handle this ourselves. After all, I'm sure that you have your own issues to deal with. I've heard that Nine Dragons Emperor has been causing quite a bit of trouble for you lately, Feng said, smiling as he rejected Phoenix Rain's offer. While Heaven's Burial wasn't an easy foe, Zero Wing was no pushover either. All right. Phoenix Rain sighed. She felt that Zero Wing was too stubborn. Although Zero Wing had grown quite strong, it still wasn't a match for Heaven's Burial. Moreover, its enemy had the support of Blackwater and Beast Emperor. If this war weren't dealt with properly, it might mean the fall of Zero Wing. After Feng disconnected the call, he contacted Aqua Rose and instructed her to gather the guild's internal members and the disciples from the White Tiger Dojo in White River City's guild residence. He had been preoccupied with his own matters, but now that he was free, it was time to introduce some new blood to the guild. Chapter 1604, Raising Levels. Chapter 1604, Raising Levels. Guild Leader, do you intend to include them in the guild's war of attrition? When Aqua Rose received the order to gather the experts the guild still nurtured, she could only assume that Feng wanted to use them in the war against Heaven's Burial. Currently, Zero Wing severely lacked expert players. Moreover, both the guild's internal members and the disciples from the White Tiger Dojo had improved their standards considerably. Some of the more powerful players had already reached the Trial Tower's 6th floor. Even in a super guild, these players would be considered experts. If they could send these players to the field, they could help make up for Zero Wing's lack of experts. MHM. In any case, they need training to improve their techniques. They'll grow much faster in live combat. Feng nodded. Although that is true, their levels aren't high enough. The highest leveled among them is only level 39, while most of them aren't even level 35 yet. With such a huge gap in equipment and levels, their techniques won't add to the guild's combat power regardless of how good they are, Aqua Rose said, shaking her head. The various large guilds' elite members were, on average, level 45. There was easily a 10-level gap between these elite players and Zero Wing's internal members. Meanwhile, every 5 levels was a minor turning point when it came to weapons and equipment in God's domain. Techniques couldn't make up for such a massive difference that easily. I know. That's why I'm taking them out to level, Feng said, smiling. He still wasn't satisfied with these internal members' standards, and since he had been busy with his own matters, he had set aside the issue of helping them level. But now that their combat standards had reached a sufficient level, he had to help them level up, transforming them into usable combat power for the guild. Zero Wing had nearly 200 internal members, and the White Tiger Dojo had sent him 500 disciples. Although the White Tiger Dojo's disciples weren't Zero Wing members, they were under his command while they trained with the guild. It'd be a waste not to put them to good use. With this, he could add nearly 700 experts to the guild's forces as they fought Heaven's Burial. Thus far, Zero Wing had only accumulated a little over 2,000 experts who had reached the Trial Tower's 5th floor or beyond. Another 700 experts would increase the guild's overall combat power by a massive 1/3. Taking them out to level? Aqua Rose's eyes lit up when she heard Feng's plan. She was very familiar with Feng's leveling capabilities, knowing that his leveling speed was at least 2 or 3 times faster than other peak experts. He was also more than capable of helping others level up as quickly as he did. If he took command, it wouldn't be long before Zero Wing had another 700 experts, which would make it much easier to defend the 4 high-resource maps. However, after giving the matter some more thought, Aqua Rose shook her head and said, "Guild leader, I'm afraid helping them level up will be difficult right now. Heaven's Burial is constantly watching our people. If we send our internal members to the fields to level, Heaven's Burial will certainly ambush the group. They might lose levels rather than gain them." "Relax. That is only true if Heaven's Burial can follow us," Feng said, chuckling. When he had decided to take Zero Wing's internal members out to level, in truth, it had been a passing thought. Obtaining mana ore was his true goal. Although the boneless land was rich with ores, it was also a good leveling area. Plenty of low HP and defense demonic creatures roamed the map, and their respawn rate was fairly fast. These demonic creatures' high magic resistance and combat standards were the only issues, making them difficult to deal with for magical class players. To Feng, however, these monsters were not a problem. After all, he had the Bible of Darkness, and in that map he'd be in his element. Following which, Aqua Rose notified Zero Wing's internal members and the White Tiger Dojo's disciples to gather in White River City's guild residence. While he waited, Feng made a trip to the candlelight trading firm to grab pickaxes before heading to the residence himself. When Feng arrived, the gathered crowd stirred. They had never expected their guild leader to take them out to level, and for a moment, they were all immensely excited. Every player who had played God's Domain for some time knew of the title, Sword King. Feng's battle records were also listed on the God's Domain experts list, and many swordsman players had long since analyzed these records, using them as reference. Feng didn't bother to waste time with words. Instead, he had everyone head to the teleportation hall and travel to one of Starmoon Kingdom's border towns. He then found a relatively deserted location and activated Spatial Gate. To get to the Boneless Land, one had to cross more than 10 high-level maps. If players tried to do so on their mounts, they'd have to ride for several days and would encounter many level 100+ monsters during the trip. Not even Feng would dare to take on such a high-level monster right now, not to mention other players. After ensuring that everyone had made it through the Spatial Gate, Feng stepped through and closed it. Shortly after Feng's group had disappeared into the Spatial Gate, a few assassins who had hidden in the distance revealed themselves. All of these assassins wore Heaven's Burial's guild emblem and were level 47. They were also fully equipped in level 45 fine gold and dark gold equipment. "Boss, what should we do? They left using a teleportation gate. How are we supposed to track them?" "Forget it. This is outside our abilities. Let's just report this to the higher-ups." After the several assassins discussed the situation amongst themselves, they returned to Singular Burial and told him of the teleportation gate. Teleportation gates did not reveal players' destinations, and players would only discover where the gate led to after they entered. However, Feng was the last person to step through, and once he had, the gate had disappeared. They had no way of tracking the group from Zero Wing. "It seems we've backed Black Flame into a corner. At such a crucial moment, a guild leader like him is taking a bunch of level 30+ players out to level." Singular Burial could not help but laugh when he read the report. He then turned to Daybreak Fog and asked, "Have Lei Jingyang and Blackwater's men gathered in their designated locations?" "Most of their forces have arrived. They can take action at any time," Daybreak Fog replied. "Good. Have them activate the war barriers to lock down the maps. It's about time we give Zero Wing a taste of hell," Singular Burial said, laughing madly. To crush Zero Wing swiftly, they had dispatched 8,000 experts to hunt down the enemy guild's members in the 4 high-resource maps and utilize the war barriers to trap them within. In addition, they had dispatched 40,000 elite members to guard the map's entrances. Understood. Daybreak Fog immediately commanded the guild members to spread out across the 4 maps. With Daybreak Fog's command, Heaven's Burial's members went into action, activating the war barriers and preventing every player in the 4 maps from using return scrolls. If players wished to leave the maps, they'd have to do so through the map's entrances. Meanwhile, Heaven's Burial and Blackwater's experts scoured the maps for Zero Wings members in 100-man teams. Boss Flo, there's a 6-man party from Zero Wing ahead, but they're all wearing cloaks so we can't see their levels. Should we attack? A level 47 assassin reported through his team chat as he watched the small party walk through the forest ahead. A 6-man party? Are there any important players among them? Broken Flo, who wore level 45 dark gold set equipment, asked quietly. They knew just how powerful Zero Wings experts were. This was especially true for Aqua Rose, Fire Dance, Cola, Flying Shadow, and the guild's other core members. Singular Burial had already warned them to stay as far away from these individuals as possible. Although Broken Flo wasn't pleased with the decision, he had no choice but to follow his guild leader's orders. No. None of the 6 players are on the list, but they seem to have pretty good equipment. They're likely an expert party from Zero Wing, the assassin reported after taking a closer look. Good. It seems that we've gotten lucky and come across one of Zero Wing's expert parties. Keep an eye on them. We'll head over right away. Broken Flo said as he licked his lips in anticipation. Immediately, he led his team towards the assassin's current position. Chapter 1605, Battle Array Activate. Chapter 1605, Battle Array Activate. In less than 2 minutes, Broken Flo's team found a 6-man party of cloaked players walking along a small forest path. All 6 players wore Zero Wings guild emblem. Go. Don't let any of them escape. Broken Flo shouted in the team chat as soon as he laid eyes on the 6 Zero Wing members. Immediately, Broken Flo's 100-man team spread out, swiftly encircling Zero Wing's party and cutting off any escape route. Heaven's Burial? The 6 Zero Wing members readied their weapons as they were surrounded. You guys sure are unlucky to attract my attention. Broken Flo grinned at the 6 cloaked players. Immediately, he removed the level 45 dark gold greatsword from his back and approached the 6 at a leisurely pace. At the same time, he pulled a potion from his bag and drank it. He then commanded, "Everyone guard the area. Make sure no one escapes. I want to take proper care of these Zero Wing members." When Heaven's Burial's members heard Broken Flo's command, they couldn't help their growing excitement and anticipation. These players sure are unlucky. It seems like the commander wants to finish them off personally. The last time the commander took action, he even gave an expert party from a first-rate guild a miserable beating. Not only were those experts powerless to fight back, but the commander also forced them to lose multiple pieces of equipment. I wonder if we'll get to witness the commander's trademark combat technique again. Hopefully these Zero Wing members aren't too weak and can put up a good fight. Otherwise we won't get a share of the loot. Heaven's Burial's members laughed as they ridiculed the trapped Zero Wing members. The guild had already declared that, during this hunt, not only would they earn GCPs for killing Zero Wing members, but they also got to keep whatever loot dropped from their kills. Although Zero Wing's members had been ambushed countless times, the guild's experts had suffered minimal losses. Most of these experts still had their top-tier equipment. Even if the equipment they obtained wasn't suitable for their class, they could still sell the items and make a fortune. Despite the high demand for top-tier equipment, there was practically no supply. When ordinary players obtained a piece of top-tier equipment, they usually didn't sell it for coins even if they couldn't use it themselves. Rather, most players tried to trade one piece of equipment for another that they could use. Now that they had come across 6 Zero Wing experts, this was a golden opportunity to walk away with massive profit. Of course, Broken Flo didn't care about the equipment. Rather, he wanted to relieve some stress. Broken Flo had previously been defeated in a fight with Zero Wing's top-tier experts, and he had been waiting to restore his reputation for some time. Now, however, the guild had forbidden its members from fighting Zero Wing's top-tier experts. Naturally, Broken Flo was annoyed. However, killing Zero Wing's elite members was boring. Only Zero Wing's experts could pique Broken Flo's interest. "You don't have to worry. Without my command they won't move," Broken Flo told the 6 players from Zero Wing, who watched their surroundings warily. With a calm smile, he continued, "If you want to leave this place alive, there's only one way to do it. defeat me. I don't mind if you come at me one by one or all together, but I advise you not to attempt an escape. My team includes over 60 experts from Heaven's Burial. If we attack as one, none of you will survive. If you don't have any problems, let's begin. After saying so, Broken Flow continued towards the 6-man party before him. His lax attitude proved that he didn't view the 6 experts before him as proper opponents whatsoever. Tiger, what should we do? The cleric from Zero Wing asked the robust youth in front of the party in a hushed tone. We're too outnumbered. There's no way we can break through this encirclement. It seems we have no choice but to fight this Broken Flow fellow. Infant Tiger, the party's leader, realized their situation had taken a turn for the worst. They might not have had an issue if they'd come across an ordinary expert team, but he hadn't expected them to encounter a team led by one of Heaven's Burial's top-tier experts. In a moment I'll distract him while you guys find an opportunity to strike. Don't worry about hitting me. When the other members heard Infant Tiger's plan, they nodded silently. Their leader's decision didn't surprise any of them. Although they were strong, there was a considerable gap in strength between them and Broken Flow. Only the guild's core members like Yi Wumian and Minor Wind could go toe-to-toe with such an expert. However, Broken Flow did not give Zero Wing's party much time to consider their options. Once he was within 30 yards of the party, he abruptly accelerated and pounced like a ferocious tiger as it was freed from its cage. Broken Flow saw no value in Zero Wing's ordinary experts. He currently wore level 45 Dark Gold set equipment and wielded a level 45 Dark Gold greatsword. With his equipment standards, he'd even rank among the top in a super guild. As for his techniques, he had reached the refinement realm some time ago. He'd be a mainstay in any major guild. If not for Singular Burial's prohibition, he'd even challenge Zero Wing's peak experts like Fire Dance and Aqua Rose. So fast. Broken Flow's speed caught Zero Wing's members off guard. By the time they reacted, Broken Flow was already within 10 yards. In the blink of an eye, Broken Flow circled around Infant Tiger, who stood at the forefront of the party, and swung his greatsword. As his greatsword soared towards the enemy berserker, it split into 3 copies that struck from different angles. Combat technique, Trishadao interception. Just as Broken Flow's 3 sword lights were about to bite into Infant Tiger, who was at his wit's end, decisively activated the basic strength battle array. Immediately, the mana around Infant Tiger and the other 4 melee players in the Conqueror's armor went berserk. The 5 melee players felt as if their minds connected, their senses expanding in a way they had never before experienced. Despite Broken Flow's sword lights targeting his blind spots, Infant Tiger saw all 3 clearly. Suddenly, Infant Tiger turned and sidestepped, miraculously evading all 3 attacks. Without even turning to look at Broken Flow, Infant Tiger swung his own blade, sending an arc of silver slicing through Broken Flow's side. Broken Flow panicked. Since his attacks had missed, his stance was off balance and his defense was riddled with holes. Instinctively, he activated Whirlwind Slash and rotated his body despite his awkward stance. Boom. When the 2 greatswords collided, brilliant sparks surrounded the fighters. Due to the impact, Broken Flow was forced back 2 steps. Infant Tiger, however, hadn't moved. The difference between the berserker's strengths was obvious. When Heaven's Burial's members saw this, they were dumbfounded. They had never thought that their commander would be at a disadvantage against an ordinary expert. As for Broken Flow himself, he stared at Infant Tiger with a grim expression. Although he had only exchanged 2 moves with the enemy berserker, he realized that not only was Infant Tiger's strength higher than his, but the enemy's combat standards were also extraordinary. No ordinary expert could evade his 3 accurate and fast attacks. However, the situation also confused Broken Flow. When did Zero Wing obtain an expert berserker as powerful as he was? Who are you? Broken Flow shouted at Infant Tiger. Chapter 1606, Might of a Battle Array. Chapter 1606, Might of a Battle Array. As Broken Flow questioned Infant Tiger's identity, he took a huge step backward. Starmoon Kingdom's general masses were no strangers to Zero Wing's top-tier experts, not to mention Heaven's Burial. In fact, Heaven's Burial was very familiar with the standards of the internal experts Zero Wing nurtured. However, Broken Flow had no recollection of Infant Tiger among Zero Wing's top-tier experts. The only possibility was that Zero Wing's top-tier experts had used disguise tools, playing the pig to eat the tiger and wound Heaven's Burial's expert teams. But before Broken Flow could listen to Infant Tiger's reply, the other 4 melee players from Zero Wing appeared beside him, launching their attacks. 2 Berserkers executed the Tier 1 Cross Slash and Flame Slash, the Guardian Knight used the Tier 1 Justice Roar and Holy Slash, and the Shield Warrior raised his shield and used the Tier 1 Crumbling Mountain. When the 4 melee players attacked Broken Flow, they moved like a single entity. Their various skill flew towards Broken Flow's blind spots almost simultaneously. Their attacks were as fast as lightning. What? Broken Flow was shocked yet again. When he sensed the 4 melee players' combination attack, he felt the threat of death looming over him. On instinct, he activated the Tier 1 Taboo skill, Hurricane's Descent, and created a powerful hurricane around himself using his greatsword. The Taboo skill incorporated both offense and defense in a perfect balance. A series of clangs echoed around the fight. The 4 melee players that had attacked Broken Flow were forced to retreat 2 or 3 steps, but once they stabilized, they launched another uniform assault, not giving the Berserker a moment to catch his breath. This time, the Guardian Knight and Shield Warrior rushed at Broken Flow from the front, whereas the 2 Zero Wing Berserkers approached from Broken Flow's sides. For a time, Broken Flow had to retreat as he desperately defended himself. While he did so, his HP continued to drain. What? The commander is actually... Heaven's Burial's members were utterly shocked as they watched Zero Wing's party suppress Broken Flow. Their previously playful expressions had vanished. None of these players were amateurs. They knew just how powerful their commander was, and even if they formed a 6-man party to challenge him, they wouldn't come close to killing Broken Flow. This wasn't due to the difference between their basic attributes, but the difference in their combat standards. If they tried to fight Broken Flow, he'd easily find and target their weak points. By the time they realized that they were under attack, it'd be too late to react. Moreover, Broken Flow could easily dodge and block their attacks. In the end, the Berserker commander would whittle down their HP and kill them. At most, Broken Flow would lose some HP when he blocked attacks or received a few hits that he couldn't dodge, but that'd be rare since he could use his positioning to prevent such situations. Yet now, regardless of how Broken Flow shifted his stance, he couldn't avoid the 4 melee players' pincer attacks as they continued to shave away his HP. However, this wasn't the most frightening aspect of this fight. What Heaven's Burial's members found truly shocking was the fact that Broken Flow couldn't force his way out of the encirclement. No matter how he tried to counter the 4 melee players, the outcome was the same. His targets would either deflect or block his attacks, refusing to budge an inch. Broken Flow looked like some beast trapped in a steel cage. The spectating Heaven's Burial members weren't the only ones shocked. Broken Flow, who desperately fought for his life, was flabbergasted. Of the 4 melee players assaulting him, one had combat standards to rival Infant Tiger. This Zero Wing party actually had 5 Refinement Realm experts. Even super guilds valued Refinement Realm experts, and they'd be top-ranked fighters in first-rate guilds. Yet this 6-man party had 5 of these experts. If you weren't familiar with the combat styles of Kola, Shadow Sword, Turtledove, Yi Wumian, and Zero Wing's other top-tier melee experts, he'd suspect that these 4 players were those experts in disguise. As Broken Flow continued to fend off the 4 Refinement Realm experts, whose basic attributes were even higher than his, a bitter taste filled his mouth. Although he had invited Zero Wing's party to attack him as one, he hadn't expected 4 Refinement Realm experts to gang up on him shamelessly. Even Infant Tiger danced around him, looking for the opportunity to land a fatal blow. What Broken Flow did not know, however, was that Infant Tiger and the others were just as shocked. They had never thought that the basic strength battle array would be this powerful. Not only did the battle array provide basic attributes akin to a miniature berserk skill, but their combat standards had also improved. Meanwhile, Infant Tiger wasn't moving around Broken Flow to land a fatal blow. Rather, he was helping his 4 companions by providing an additional view of the battle. By doing so, he gave his companions an accurate view of the enemy berserker's movements regardless of how Broken Flow retaliated. When Broken Flow noticed that his HP had fallen by 2/3, he dismissed his previous promise as he shouted, "Everyone attack! Do not let any of these people escape." At the same time, Broken Flow activated his berserk skill to break away from the enemy encirclement. If he didn't escape now, Infant Tiger and the other experts from Zero Wing would kill him before reinforcements arrived. Unfortunately, Heaven's Burial's other members were still dazed even after Broken Flow issued the command. Their minds only reacted a short moment later, commanding their bodies to move. As expected of Heaven's Burial, its members' word is nothing more than a fart. Infant Tiger ridiculed Broken Flow. Hearing the insult, Broken Flow's expression twisted into something dark. Could Infant Tiger have any less shame? Although he had challenged Zero Wing's entire party by himself, how could he have known that 5 of the 6 party members were Refinement Realm experts? Moreover, their coordination was so seamless that they moved as if they shared one body. Against such coordinated attacks, this team could even defeat a Flowing Water Realm expert, much less Broken Flow. However, Broken Flow's call for help prompted Infant Tiger and the others to activate Power of Darkness. Once their basic attributes soared, they launched another ruthless assault against the Berserker. This time, however, they held nothing back. After Feng had upgraded the Bible of Darkness, the Power of Darkness he granted his allies had grown stronger as well. Although Broken Flow's Berserk skill was powerful, it was subpar compared to the improved Power of Darkness. In addition, Broken Flow's basic attributes were already lower than Infant Tiger and his companions. When both sides had activated their Berserk skills, the gap between them only widened. Before the healers from Heaven's Burial could get within range, Zero Wing's Guardian Knight and Shield Warrior slammed their shields into Broken Flow, forcing the Berserker off balance. Infant Tiger and the other 2 Berserkers then appeared behind their target, launching a joint assault. Chop. Flame Slash. Cross Slash. Even under normal circumstances, Broken Flow would struggle to cope with these 3 simultaneous attacks. In the end, all 3 attacks landed squarely, draining his remaining HP. As his body collapsed, he dropped 3 pieces of level 45 dark gold equipment. Commander? How is this possible? Heaven's Burial's members were dazed when they watched their commander die. They had never dreamed that a peak expert like Broken Flow could be killed so easily. Moreover, Broken Flow had been slain by a bunch of Zero Wing members they had never even heard of. Chapter 1607. Difference in Teams. Chapter 1607. Difference in Teams. For a time after Broken Flow's death, Heaven's Burial's members were at a loss of what to do. However, Infant Tiger and his party members had no intentions of giving their enemies time to react. They immediately charged into the enemy ranks. They crossed the 30 yards to their targets in a few short seconds. Upon reaching the enemy front line, the Shield Warrior and Guardian Knight slammed their shields into the enemy melee players, crumbling the battle formation. Meanwhile, Infant Tiger and the other 2 Berserkers nimbly weaved their way into the enemy lines before executing Whirlwind Slash. 3 powerful tornadoes instantly engulfed Heaven's Burial's members. Not only did the attacks push these players back, but they also lost a significant chunk of their HPs. Following which, the Berserker trio approached the nearest enemies and finished off their weakened foes. In the blink of an eye, several members of Heaven's Burial's team died. They're trying to break out of the encirclement. Kill them. Finally, some of Heaven's Burial's members reacted, moving to intercept Infant Tiger and his friends. Those with Berserk skills promptly activated them as the healers and ranged DPS channeled and executed one spell and skill after another. However, Infant Tiger and the others paid the healers and ranged DPS no mind as they ruthlessly targeted players without Berserk skills. With an overwhelming advantage in basic attributes and superior combat standards, they finished their targets off easily. Even half HP MTs fell after 2 or 3 attacks. By the time Heaven's Burial's healers had launched their healing spells, their team had suffered over a dozen casualties. Moreover, the majority of the players that had died were MTs. In contrast, Zero Wing's 5 melee players were mostly unharmed despite being surrounded by so many melee players. They only suffered superficial damage. When the ranged DPS's attacks finally reached them, not only did Infant Tiger and his companions seamlessly evade the attacks as if they had long predicted the trajectories, but they also used some of Heaven's Burial's members as human shields. Although Heaven's Burial's healers did their best to keep their allies alive, Infant Tiger and the other 2 Berserkers' attack power was simply overwhelming. Every one of the 5 melee players' attacks dealt over -10,000 damage if not blocked in time. Furthermore, the 3 Berserkers were capable of launching multiple attacks per second. Elsewhere on the battlefield, although Heaven's Burial's members attempted to kill Zero Wing's lone healer, Zero Wing's 2 MTs had already moved to protect their comrade. Even when over a dozen melee players tried to corner the healer, Zero Wing's MTs easily repelled them all. In the end, they could only watch as the healer maintained Infant Tiger and the other Zero Wing Berserkers' HP as the human meat grinders slaughtered their allies. As time passed, Heaven's Burial's 100-man team continued to lose members. In the face of Infant Tiger and the other 4 melee players from Zero Wing, Heaven's Burial's numerous experts were a joke. Just who are these people? When did Zero Wing find such experts? The more Heaven's Burial's members fought, the more frightened they became. At this point, the difference in both sides' strength was clear for all to see. No matter what kind of attacks they used, Infant Tiger and his companions effortlessly dodged or blocked them. In contrast, the Zero Wing Berserkers' attacks always slipped past their defenses, landing direct hits and causing significant amounts of damage. And the more Infant Tiger and the others fought, the more familiar they became with the battle array. The battle array was too strong. Once they activated the battle array, they basically had a 360-degree view of their surroundings as long as they maintained proper positioning. Moreover, their improved physiques made it easy to cope with incoming attacks. In their eyes, Heaven's Burial's members were little more than children waving toy weapons. They had no problems predicting their enemies' attacks. They finally understood how God's Domain's peak experts were so powerful. They hadn't understood where the difference lay between them and these experts in the past, but now they saw it clearly. They had to admit that being able to see everything around them and having control of their environment was intoxicating. It was no wonder why Feng had taken responsibility for their deaths. With this improved perception and control, they would be utter fools if they let a bunch of ordinary experts kill them. Only top-tier experts and peak experts with superior strength and techniques had any hope of defeating them. After 3 short minutes, only 20 players remained of Heaven's Burial's 100-man team. The survivors were fear-stricken as they stared at Infant Tiger and the other Zero Wing members. They felt as if these people before them were demons that had crawled up from hell, not players. Despite the cooperation of over 60 of their guild's experts, they had done nothing to Infant Tiger's 6-man party. In fact, they hadn't even dropped their enemies' HPs to below 50% throughout this fight. Meanwhile, when Infant Tiger and the others saw the corpses strewn across the ground, they couldn't help but feel a little proud. They had dreamed of defeating a 20-man expert team from Heaven's Burial, yet they had slain several times that. Retreat. Run away. Suddenly, the only thought Heaven's Burial's members had was of escape. Without hesitation, they turned and fled. Even with over 60 guild experts, they hadn't been able to do anything to Infant Tiger and his team. Now that they only had a bunch of elite members remaining, they were even less of a match for Zero Wing's party. They'd only throw themselves into the jaws of death if they continued to fight. If they died, they lose a level and a piece of equipment. Although the guild would offer compensation, it'd be far from enough to cover their losses. Don't think that you can get away so easily. Infant Tiger and the others chased after their fleeing enemies. With a massive difference in basic attributes, Heaven's Burial's members couldn't escape Infant Tiger and his companions' pursuit even if they spread out as they ran. After another short moment, Heaven's Burial's 100-man team had been utterly annihilated. Meanwhile, as war barriers activated in the 4 high-resource maps Zero Wing's members occupied, panic ensued among the unrelated players in the maps. They all pulled up the official forums to discuss the matter. What's going on? Why aren't return scrolls working in the Grieving Swamp all of a sudden? This must be Heaven's Burial's doing. I've heard that Heaven's Burial is going all out to hunt Zero Wing's members. The guild has already dispatched over 8,000 expert members, not to mention the elites. It seems Heaven's Burial is finally getting serious. With 8,000 experts, they'll have no issues eliminating Zero Wing. Crap. They're really fighting each other. There's a fight between Heaven's Burial and Zero Wing's teams not too far from me right now. Heaven's Burial's 100-man team is amazing. It's completely overwhelming Zero Wing's 100-man team. The public had become interested in Heaven's Burial's hunt. No one had expected the guild to dispatch 8,000 experts to slaughter Zero Wing's members. Even a first-rate guild could, at most, field 3,000 experts. After all, the requirements to be considered an expert player in God's domain had become stricter than ever before. In the past, players would be considered experts once they reached the Trial Tower's 4th floor, but now, players had to reach the 5th floor. Some stricter guilds even required their experts to reach the 5th floor's middle stage. Yet, Heaven's Burial had nearly 3 times more experts than a first-rate guild. Guild leader, we've received a casualty report from Starmoon Kingdom. Daybreak Fog suddenly approached Singular Burial, who commanded the battle before them. Quietly she said, "Thus far we've killed 1,809 Zero-Wing members." "That many? Didn't the battle start less than half an hour ago?" Singular Burial nodded, satisfied upon hearing the report. "What about our casualties?" Although the direct attacks were far more costly, they could deal a more severe blow to their enemy. Hearing Singular Burial's question, Daybreak Fog's expression darkened as she hesitated. "Has something happened?" When Singular Burial saw Daybreak Fog's reaction, apprehension welled within him. "We've lost 3,237 members thus far. Among them, 923 are expert players," Daybreak Fog said. "How is that possible?" Singular Burial was dumbfounded when he heard these numbers. Immediately he demanded, "What happened over there?" They had sent over 8,000 experts over to Starmoon Kingdom, and Zero Wing only had around 2,000 experts. Even if Fire Dance and Zero Wing's other peak and top-tier experts took action, they could never make up for the massive difference. Chapter 1608, Indiscernible Zero Wing. Chapter 1608, Indiscernible Zero Wing. Daybreak Fog could only shake her head helplessly in response to Singular Burial's question. Even she had been confused when she received the statistics report, wondering if someone had made a mistake when compiling the information. However, although someone could have miscounted the enemy's casualties, how could they do so with their own death counts? In other words, Zero Wing had indeed killed 3,237 of their members in less than half an hour. Moreover, nearly 1/3 were the guild's experts. "Has no one discovered the reason behind this yet?" Singular Burial growled, his brows twitching slightly in anger. Over 10% of their 8,000 experts had died in less than half an hour. If the other major powers learned that they didn't even know the cause of this grievous loss, they'd become a laughingstock. Unlike guild elites, a guild expended all of its precious resources into nurturing its experts. They were incomparably more valuable than the guild's elite members. A loss of 1 expert was a much larger impact than losing 10 elites. If a first-rate guild suddenly suffered nearly 1,000 expert deaths, the loss would be severe enough to hamper the guild's development. After all, experts were a guild's main combat power when obtaining top-tier equipment and contesting for resource maps. They were also the foundation when competing with other guilds. "We still don't have any information, but I've sent people to investigate the matter," Daybreak Fog said as she expressed her frustration over the situation. Just as Singular Burial was about to say something more, he received a call. The caller was none other than Broken Flow, one of the commanders tasked with hunting Zero Wing's members. "Has something happened?" Singular Burial asked, curious about Broken Flow's anxiety. When Singular Burial noticed Broken Flow's current level, he asked in surprise, "How did you lose a level?" Singular Burial clearly remembered Broken Flow being level 50 before they embarked on the mission, yet now the Berserker was only level 49. Broken Flow was one of Heaven's Burial's top-ranked experts, and with the level 45 Dark Gold set equipment he wore, he could contend with any of the Super Guild's top-tier experts, yet he had lost a level. Why wouldn't Singular Burial be surprised? "I died." Although Broken Flow hesitated, he revealed the truth, and he did so with an incredibly grim expression. "You died." Singular Burial was even more shocked. "Did you encounter Black Flame or the other experts I warned you about?" He had planted over 30 spies in Zero Wing, and although they didn't have access to the guild's core secrets, they could discover its experts' identities. Hence, he knew that only a few people in Zero Wing were capable of killing an expert of Broken Flow's caliber. "No." Broken Flow's expression darkened further. "No? Then who killed you?" Singular Burial demanded. "Has Zero Wing received reinforcements from somewhere else? That shouldn't be possible. I haven't heard of any powers lending the guild aid." Zero Wing had formed a close relationship with both the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's Phoenix Rain and the Secret Pavilion's Yuan Tiexin. If these two superpowers helped Zero Wing, he doubted that he could do anything to threaten the guild. The difference between Heaven's Burial's background and the two superpowers was just too massive. Moreover, Heaven's Burial lacked the home ground advantage in Starmoon Kingdom. He had paid close attention to the two superpowers, waiting to see if they would aid Zero Wing or not. However, he hadn't heard any news of either organization helping his enemy. This was one of the reasons that he had dared to hunt down Zero Wing's members. One of Zero Wing's expert parties killed me, Broken Flow explained after taking a deep breath. Zero Wing's expert parties? Realization dawned on Singular Burial. There were some capable players among Zero Wing's experts, and if Broken Flow were careless and underestimated them, he might get himself killed. Sighing and shaking his head disapprovingly, he continued, "You are too careless. Well, don't tell me that you only contacted me to tell me this?" MHM. Broken Flow nodded silently. Seeing Broken Flow's response, Singular Burial felt wrathful flames burn within him. Meanwhile, when Daybreak Fog heard Broken Flow's response from beside her guild leader, she noticed something odd about the Berserker's behavior. He had contacted the guild leader about such a small matter. Did he think that leading a guild was a leisurely job? But before Singular Burial could reprimand Broken Flow, the Berserker shared a battle video in the video chat. "Guild leader, I was killed by an expert party from Zero Wing. I don't know how it's possible, but 5 of the 6 party members were Refinement Realm experts. Moreover, their basic attributes are extremely high. They were even higher than mine," Broken Flow explained. "Zero Wing still has 5 Refinement Realm experts we don't know about. How?" Singular Burial and Daybreak Fog denied Broken Flow's claims almost simultaneously. Only one out of several hundred players in God's domain could reach the Trial Tower's 5th floor. Among these experts, very few could overcome their limits, achieving extreme control of their bodies and entering the Refinement Realm. Refinement Realm experts were practically VIPs in first-rate guilds right now. Even super guilds struggled to nurture such experts. Whenever a new player reached the Refinement Realm, the various superpowers rushed to recruit them. Yet, Zero Wing had introduced 5 such Refinement Realm experts to the battlefield. No matter how Singular Burial and Daybreak Fog looked at it, Broken Flow's claim sounded more like fantasy than reality. However, by the time they finished watching the battle video, their expressions had turned grim. Indeed, as Broken Flow had said, every one of the 5 melee players from Zero Wing was slightly stronger than the Berserker. If 5 such expert formed a party, said party would wield terrifying killing power. Throughout Heaven's Burial, only Lei Jingyang's forces could likely stand against such a party. As Singular Burial was about to say something, Lightning Blade, the chief MT of Heaven's Burial's main force, contacted him as well. "Guild leader, look at this video. Not long ago, I encountered an expert party from Zero Wing with 5 Refinement Realm experts. My team was no match for them, and in the end, only a few of my brothers and I managed to escape. We need to notify everyone right away and tell them to be careful of this 6-man party," Lightning Blade urgently reported. As they listened to Lightning Blade's report, Singular Burial and Daybreak Fog's expressions darkened further. A trace of shock flashed in their eyes. What is going on? Singular Burial was even more confused after watching the battle video Lightning Blade had sent. Daybreak Fog struggled to comprehend the situation as well. Both Broken Flow and Lightning Blade led 100-man expert teams, but their teams operated in different maps. Although the Refinement Realm experts Broken Flow and Lightning Blade had encountered wore black cloaks, they hadn't bothered to hide their appearances. The Refinement Realm experts in each party were also different classes. It was certain that Broken Flow and Lightning Blade had encountered different Zero Wing parties. This proved that Zero Wing had gained an additional 10 Refinement Realm experts. If these experts were split and assigned to 100-man teams, they would pose a huge threat to Heaven's Burial's teams. But as Singular Burial tried to think of a countermeasure for these new Refinement Realm experts, the other commanders began to report back. All of these commanders reported the same situation that Broken Flow and Lightning Blade had encountered. Every one of these commanders mentioned a 6-man party from Zero Wing consisting of 5 Refinement Realm experts. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.